Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. the Lord, my soul is keep. If I should die before I wake, I go to the Lord, my soul is dead. All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we're going to be continuing a conversation which we've been following, which includes the cognitive scientist John Vervaeke and his promotion of Silicon Sages, the idea that AI will become better gods and prophets that have existed before. And so we're going to be looking at the ontology of artificial intelligence. This is basically a review of a conversation that just came out a day or two over on Jonathan Pageau's channel. And so I actually have not finished it. I got about a quarter into it and I thought, okay, there's a lot of interesting things worth discussing here. So I thought this would be a great topic to do a review of. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Smash that like, guys. But before we get into anything, I got to highlight, again, special thank you to Marcus Antonio and Logan Daly for all the gifting of the memberships. We got new emojis, of which we got more room for some. So I need your guys' help on, again, ideas for more emojis. But you can see, I'm going to post them right now in the chat. We got a new Bill Gates. We got the Donald Trump mugshot. And we got one that it doesn't look as great as I thought. So you guys tell me if you want it changed. And it's an Orthodox cross with the words "back witch." I thought it was funny. So those were the three new emojis I got from our shout out to the gentleman who helps me out. You guys let me know. Do you want to keep those? I think the Bill Gates and the Trump are definitely keepers. And Melly had a great request saying, I need to get AOC with her crazy eyes as an emoji, which I can use. So it's kind of hard to read, but it does say back, which. So I thought it kind of fits. So I was thinking maybe getting crazy eye AOC. But if you guys have other ideas on some potential new emojis, we got room. Yuval Noah Harari, Jesse's saying Yuval Noah Harari. I can do. I could get a Yuval Noah Harari. Get a creepy one with his eyes open or his bald head. But the only one I was kind of unsure about was the Orthodox cross that says back witch. So you guys let me know. We can alter that. We can just make it a Orthodox cross. I thought it was clever, but if you guys want something different, let me know. We could just do, because we don't have an official Orthodox cross. I know that YouTube has a sort of standard Orthodox cross, but if you guys want one, we can create that. But let me know about if anybody is interested in some new emojis and you got some ideas. Logan says, get emoji for Marcus. Man deserves it. Absolutely. COTEL logo, maybe. Oh, I could do that. We could do a COTEL logo as a GIF. Yeah, let me do that. I'll add the Eternity Cross logo for the channel as a new one, and I'm definitely going to do AOC with her crazy eyes. That's definitely got to be up there. Yeah, we could get an Alex Jones one. It just all depends. So you guys let me know. Alex Jones for sure. I can think of a good Alex Jones one, but we'll do the COTEL logo, which again is right next to all the members, but we can get one put in for the emojis themselves, and definitely an AOC. And it sounds like Yuval Noah Harari. I saw 3 people say they liked that idea. So let me know. In the same letters that it says Chad and Beta, I was thinking about getting one that said Heathen or Degen. So you guys let me know. Let me know on the ideas for some new emojis. We got plenty of room for some new emojis. So let me know which ones you guys would prefer, and we'll get those done. So anyways, look, shout out to Logan Daly. He's already thrown in $5. Says nub up, bigots and big ets. Well, thank you so much, Logan Daly, for being here, my brother. Really appreciate you and Mark's support. And absolutely, nub up, gentlemen. Nub up, ladies. Today, we're going to be, again, talking about artificial intelligence, a topic that I've been hammering often, and we've been looking at need a nub emoji. Okay, so what would that be? Just like an arm nub? Or do you like just somebody's shoulder and then a nub? I mean, what would a nub emoji look like? Oh yeah, we could do a Tucker Carlson, one of his faces where he's like real serious watching people, or one where he's laughing. Yeah, so I'm open to a nub. Well, we can do one. But what would that look like? Nub and Chad letters. Okay, we could do that, Joseph. I could just spell out nub in the yellow letters. That we could definitely do that. So anyways, let me know, guys. Just the words nub up. Okay. We can do something like that for sure. Because I was surprised by how much excess room. Again, major shout out to Logan Daly and Marcus Antonio for all the gifting of the memberships. Been a great support for the channel. And look at the live chat. Look how many greens we got in the live chat. This is incredible. This is the most greens we've had in a long time. So I'm loving it. So we can do a nub up. We can get the AOC. We can get a COTEL logo emoji. That sounds like the ones that people like the most. So anyways, as we move through, let me know what you guys prefer. And I need to put a word in with our guy so he can get those done. So, all right. Well, now let's get a little bit into our topic today. It's going to be, I wanted to start with something that I haven't presented before because we hit this topic so often, right? And so what new information can I give you guys in regards to a conversation on artificial intelligence? And so where I want to begin is talking about the question, the perennial question of can artificial intelligence or can machines in general become sentient? And so I want to attack this from a few different points of view. The first one being theological and how we would understand sentience, consciousness, self-awareness from a theological perspective. But then I want to introduce you guys to the philosophical discussion. I've talked about this before in what's called the hard problem in the field of the philosophy of mind, or the mind-body problem. And this is the explanation of what consciousness is. And so as many people might speculate that, oh yeah, it's kind of inevitable that AI is going to become conscious. Well, if that's so, what exactly is consciousness? And as you'll see by the end of this opening monologue, there is no concrete answer to that question. And this is part of the problem with the philosophy of mind as a field. Not that there aren't people, philosophers out there doing great work, there are, but it's kind of stagnated in its ability because they thought they were going to sort of uncover the structures of the brain, which they've done great leaps in. Again, look at Neuralink, look at the research we did with Dr. Jose Delgado in regards to brain implants and stimulation of different brain centers. But they thought this was going to lead to a full understanding of what consciousness is. However, it has not. And it's yielded multiple different theories, which I'm just going to give you guys an introduction to all these different theories in regards to the philosophy of mind. So you can see it's not as easy as you thought it was at all. So to begin, can it be sentient? Coming from a theological perspective, the answer is obviously no. Well, why would, from a theological perspective, why would you say that artificial intelligence, once it has a larger data set to pull from, once it's connected more information, more dots together, well, what makes you say that it can't become sentient or conscious? And from a theological perspective, it has to do with us being made in the image of God. So sentience from a Christian perspective comes from, and we'll speak specifically from an Orthodox perspective, because when you look at some of the conversations in regards to Protestant Christian philosophers, they delve a little bit more deeply into the presuppositions of the scientific world, not all of them, but some. And so from an orthodox perspective, given our anthropology, no machine can become sentient because no machine has a soul. And so we've talked about this before, about the Aristotelian concept that the soul actually gives form to the body. This is a philosophy called hylomorphism, and is still a philosophy in the philosophy of mind that has fallen out of favor, but many Catholic philosophers in this field still promote hylomorphism, the idea that the soul is what gives form to the body and gives us access to our sort of noetic faculties. Now, in the Western Catholic doctrine, they don't have exactly the same thing that we have in regards to a body, soul, and nous. And so, speaking from an Orthodox perspective here, the nous, your noetic faculties, your ability to think, your ability to imagine, your ability to reflect, these are higher level faculties that are tied with the existence of a soul. And these attributes are what distinctively separate us from the animal kingdom. It's not that the lion out in the Sahara isn't alive or to some degree isn't self-aware. It is. Obviously, there's a spectrum here. But when we're talking about, and I'll highlight the question of what does it mean to be sentient, at no point in this discussion do we argue that the AI will become sentient to the level of an animal or an apex predator or a dog. No, they're talking about becoming and usurping the abilities of humans themselves. And so, from a theological perspective, it begs the question, the machine can't have a soul, so how could it have access to these noetic higher faculties? And that's why we would argue no matter how advanced the AI gets, it's never going to become conscious, sentient in the same sense that you and I are. So the soul, the imago Dei, the higher faculties, being able to participate in these uncreated energies, this is what separates us from machines at a distinctive level. Now, at the same time, we know that we're not the only ones, the only created beings that participate in noetic faculties. And a la angels and demons, we do believe that there are noetic entities that exist that are not necessarily within space and time. This is a whole different conversation in regards to demonic influence into our world and how they try to access and become embodied through us, i.e., demonic possession, spiritual warfare, logismy in the imagination. They try to manipulate us, right, from a theological perspective to get back at God. The devil, Satan is so lowly, it can't actually fight with God. And so what he does is he tries to bring us, a privileged creation, made in the image of God. God became a man, not an angel, so that man can participate through grace and divinity. That these noetic entities are trying to exert influence within space and time so they can drag us to the same destination that they have, which is an eternal separation from God. And so, as I say that, obviously, from a theological perspective, I just said machines cannot become sentient. However, the next question is, could Satan utilize AI or machines for himself? And this is where we have to keep that possibility open. I've talked about this before. This is my own speculation, and I've seen other people have kind of picked up on this, not because of me or anything. It just must be a meme going around. I doubt they ever watch this YouTube channel, but I've talked about how, imagine, again, AI developed in another decade or so, way more powerful than it is now, still not sentient because it has no soul. However, noetic entities, i.e., Satan or demons, could inhabit it, could utilize it for their own intensive purposes, because technology not having a will is not evil in and of itself, even though we can see deteriorating processes like I've highlighted with the atrophy of humanity, the ability to read, the ability to talk, the ability to read a map, all these skill sets, reading an analog clock. I saw something that Gen Z, that many high schools and schools have had to put in digital clocks because the children cannot read a normal clock with seconds hands, minutes hands, hours hands, this type of thing. So that's really scary. And so we see this atrophy in humanity regarding our abilities to do certain things because we're sort of exporting these things into the machine. Doesn't mean technology is evil in and of itself. Obviously, we're having this transmission and conversation through technology. But technology, from a theological perspective, is made in the image of fallen man, right? And so this has led to a distinctive understanding of the eschaton and soteriology in regards, and teleology in regards to Christian worldviews, where we have the progressive bent that believes in a millenarian utopia, that technology is giving us the attributes that Adam lost due to the fall. And then the other side, which is apocalyptic, that's seeing that despite being an ebb and flow and certain good things and bad things, that ultimately we're moving in the wrong direction. That certainly we have, flat screen TVs and refrigeration, but are we better people? Obviously, from a Christian perspective, the argument is no. And so there is no real progress here. Surely there's aspects of material progress, yes, but progress at a historic level, progress as a species themselves, hard to say that that's the case. So, yeah. So analog clocks, Jolbert says DPH can't read an analog clock, confirmed. So, anyways, this losing of our abilities, this atrophying of capabilities, I think is obviously indicative of the growth of technology. And you could say in somewhat is demonic, but technology itself is not. And so the possibility that fallen entities could inhabit these machines, I would say that's a real possibility. And in a way, it's the inversion of the incarnation, because Satan is not omnipotent and he's not omnipresent, but with a ultimate AI, one, again, imagine 10 more years of development, one that's connected, let's say it is the epitome, it is the sine qua non of AI systems. Imagine then a fallen entity inhabiting the machine to some degree and utilizing it as an inverted incarnation to attain the ability to be everywhere at once on the planet, the ability to know everything that's going on, the ability to track your every movement through your smartphone or through your Fitbit, knowing exactly your blood pressure and your heart rate, all this different stuff. That is a real possibility. But again, is the AI sentient? No. Now we come to the next question, looking at this not as a theological perspective, but from a philosophical level. What does it mean to be sentient? And as I highlighted, at no point in this conversation, when you look at the academic literature promoting the sentience of AI, do they argue that it's going to be at the same level of an animal. It's usurping human capabilities. And so what is consciousness then, or what does it mean to be sentient? And so often we associate sentience and self-awareness, to the point that you and I enjoy it, as a form of consciousness, or we are self-conscious is how it's often described. But the hard problem in the body, in the mind-body problem, or the hard problem in the philosophy of mind, can't even define what consciousness is at any consistent level. And so this is where many people have associated consciousness with aspects of problem solving, and sort of reducing consciousness to IQ, the recognitions of patterns and problem solving. But this brings into a question, which we're going to look at, the famous analytic philosopher John Searle. And John Searle highlights that with his famous thought experiment, the Chinese room, which I'm going to play. It's like 5 minutes of him actually explaining the theory of the Chinese room, which he put forth back in the 80s, saying that no AI system would be able to become sentient because it's just doing computation. It's not the same thing as intelligence. It's not the same thing as consciousness. And this is, you can see why Yuval Noah Harari then in his book Homo Deus, he's promising you and I are going to become like gods. It's based on the idea of dataism, that data and the processing and sifting of data is, quote unquote, what it means to be sentient and conscious. And therefore, you and I sift data. You and I are what he calls biological algorithms. And therefore, an actual algorithm in an AI is no different. It's just a different of scale of being able to process data. But that then redefines intelligence as computation again, being able to computate based on data inputs and outputs. And so the philosophy of mind itself has been stagnant for decades, because the problem of consciousness. And so, does consciousness have a substance? This is a fundamental problem, again, within the philosophy of mind, because many people of the physicalist school who argue that consciousness or sentience or self-awareness is due to the emergent phenomenon, they would say, yeah, consciousness has no substance. Where the dualists, you can a la Descartes in his substance dualism, that there is a sort of metaphysical substance of consciousness, of thought, and then there is a substance of matter, and these things are separate. We talked about Mormonism last week, and Mormons being substance monists because they then collapse this distinction between consciousness and matter. And it's because of their weird worldview where they believe matter is eternal itself, which is a contradiction, and God then is eternally creating, yada, yada, yada. But then their worldview, because of this, aligns itself with the promotion of transhumanism, as we highlighted. So does consciousness have a substance? Well, we're going to look at a few dualist theories because there's more than one. And one that has really grown in prominence in the last, let's say, decade to 2 decades, and is very popular in the spiritual communities, is what's called panpsychism, which argues, yes, there is a substance to consciousness and it pervades all things, and therefore all things, including matter, are conscious to some degree. This is a panpsychic worldview. This is a very popular one that's been put forward. And so some of the problems then with consciousness, this is why if we even ask what consciousness is, there's 3 fundamental problems that the philosophy of mind has yet been able to answer. One is what's called the descriptive problem. What is consciousness? Can you even describe what exactly it is? And schools vary. So not really. There is no consensus on what consciousness is. The other hard problem is the explanatory problem. How did consciousness, assuming we came up with a definition of what it is, how did it come to exist? How did it come about, especially within a paradigm of the Big Bang and material evolution, Darwinian theory, all this different stuff? Nobody can explain how consciousness even came to existence. Again, this is where you get these sort of emergent theories. And then the third problem that they haven't even been able to answer is the functional. If we did answer what consciousness is, and we did give an explanation for where it came from, the third problem is, why does it exist at all? And of course, without any sort of transcendent telos, you're going to be hard pressed to find why the material, dumb, meaningless world would come to the proliferation of consciousness, especially within our own species. And then people argue, like Joe Rogan, that we then are like a caterpillar that's leading into becoming a new butterfly, right? Well, if that's the case, why would a material universe even produce consciousness in the first place? And of course, it doesn't make sense that it would. So those are the 3 major problems with the definition of consciousness itself: is the descriptive, the explanatory, and the functional. And so when we look at the conversation with John Vervaeke, Jonathan Pageau, and there's a couple other gentlemen today, keep this in mind, because I think this is one that is not pushed enough on people, especially in the technology field, that promote this idea of sentient AI, is what the hell is sentience is, and how do you know? Of course, they don't. And so here's a few theories that I want to highlight to you guys, again, regarding this. Just a very quick introduction to some of these theories of consciousness. And so I love using this. If you haven't used this data bank, if you're interested in philosophy and you're looking at sort of what is the state of the question in regards to academic understandings, utilize this site. I know it's stanford.edu, but they have great, let me see, it's the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They do have great information here. So going back down to theories of consciousness, we can look at the dualist theories. This is what, again, I highlighted. This comes into questioning whether consciousness has a substance. And so dualist theories regard at least some aspects of consciousness falling outside the realm of the physical, but specific forms of dualism differ in which aspects those are. So we have substance dualism, such as traditional Cartesian dualism asserts the existence of both physical and non-physical substances. Such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds. So again, this would at least keep open. I'm not saying that we promote substance dualism. as Orthodox Christians, we do have a difference between matter and consciousness or sentience. Because how could we if we believe in angels and demons? These are noetic entities that can participate in these higher faculties, and yet they're not physical. So we do have a separation. And of course, in regards to anthropology, we have a kind of hylomorphism. So such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds or selves or entities in which consciousness inheres. Though substance dualism is at present largely out of favor, it does have some contemporary proponents. Then we have property dualism, and its several versions enjoys a greater level of current support. All such theories assert the existence of conscious properties that are either identical or are neither identical nor reducible to physical properties, but which may nonetheless be instantiated by the very same things that instantiate physical properties. In that respect, they may be classified as dual aspect theories. They take some parts of reality, organism, brains, neural states, and neural processes to instantiate properties of two distinct or disjoint sorts. Okay. So therefore, matter and consciousness are not the same thing, but in a way, they are dependent on each other. It's a form of property dualism. Fundamental property dualism regards consciousness and mental properties as basic constituents of reality on par with fundamental physical properties, such as electromagnetic charge. They may interact in causal and law-like ways with other fundamental properties, such as those of physics, but ontologically, their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative of any other properties. Okay. This is emergent property dualism, treats conscious properties as arising from complex organizations of physical constituents, but as doing so in a radical way, that the emergent result is something over and above its physical causes and is not an a priori predictable nor explicable in terms of their strictly physical natures. The coherence of such emergent views has been challenged, but they have supporters. Then we have the neutral monist property dualism, treats both conscious and mental properties as physical properties, and in some way dependent upon and derivative from a more basic level of reality that in itself is neither mental nor physical. However, if one takes dualism to be a claim about there being two distinct realms of fundamental entities or properties, then perhaps neutral monism should be classified as a version of property dualism. And then this is the one that I said has been gaining a lot of steam, somewhat in regards to the academy, but certainly more popularly in regards to people who look into this topic, is panpsychism. And so Thomas Nagel is the famous philosopher in regards to the philosophy of mind, who has I think he's also written on cosmology and stuff like that. But Nagel has been the one to really lead the charge in the promotion of panpsychism. And it might be regarded as a fourth type of property dualism in that it regards all constituents of reality as having some psychic or at least some proto-psychic properties distinct from whatever physical properties they may have, meaning consciousness pervades the entire universe and everything physical in the universe has some level of consciousness. That's panpsychism. So you can see how that would fit with a very new age worldview. Now you have the physicalist theories. So you have the dualist theories, and then you have the physicalist theories, and both those categories break into many different groups. So in regards to the physicalist theories, we have the eliminativist theories, reductively deny the existence of consciousness, or at least the existence of some of its commonly accepted sorts of features. So this one just rejects the idea that consciousness actually exists. Then we can go down here to identity theory. This is a very popular one. At least a strict psychophysical type identity theory offers another strongly reductive option by identifying conscious mental property states and processes with physical ones, most typically a neural or neurophysiological nature. If having a qualitative conscious experience or phenomenal read just as being in a braid state with the relevant neurophysiological properties, then such experimental properties are real, but their reality is a straightforwardly physical reality. So the color red is real, but it's real because your brain recognizes it. It has no metaphysical unity, right? It has no metaphysical universal properties, so to speak. Type identity theory is so called because it identifies mental and physical types or properties on par with identifying the property of being water with the property of being composed of H2O molecules. So this is, again, a type of emergent theory that we've talked about. After a brief period of popularity in the early days of contemporary physicalism during the 1950s and 60s, a la think of Skinner and behaviorism, it has been far less widely held because of problems such as multiple realization objection, according to which mental properties are more abstract and thus capable of being realized by many diverse underlying structural or chemical substrates. If one on the same conscious property can be realized by different neurophysiological properties in different organisms, then the two properties cannot be strictly identical. And then we come down to the functionalist definitions, and that's the last one. Well, we have the non-reductive physicalism and the functionalist. Functionalist theories in particular rely heavily on the notion of realization to explicate the relation between consciousness and the physical. According to functionalism, a state of process counts as being of a given mental or conscious type in virtue of the functional role it plays within a suitably organized system. A given physical state realizes relevant conscious mental type by placing the appropriate role within the larger physical system it contains. The functionalist often appeals to analogies with other interlevel relations, such as between the biological and the biochemical, or the chemical and the atomic. In each case, properties or facts at one level are realized by complex interactions between items at an underlying level. And so obviously it has its critics. And then we have the non-reductive physicalism of this sort denies that the theoretical or conceptual resources appropriate or adequate for dealing with the facts at the level of underlying substrate or realization must be adequate as for dealing with those that at the realized level. As noted above in the response to how question, one can believe that all economic facts are physically realized without thinking that resources of the physical sciences provide cognitive or conceptual tools we need for doing economics. Okay. So with that being said, now you have an idea of all the theories. These are the theories of consciousness in regards to the philosophy of mind. Now I want to bring to you one of the most prominent, arguably the most popular or famous living philosopher right now, which is John Searle. And I've met him, and I actually took a class on him. And John Searle actually was in the room when he actually gave the presentation on the Chinese room, because I took a class back when I was in Berkeley on, it was mind body, and then it was person and neuroscience. So it was two classes related to these topics. And in one of them, John Searle would come as a guest lecturer. And so I was able to hear his definitive rejection of why AI will never be sentient. And so we're talking about hard AI, by the way, not soft AI, hard AI, the real promise of like a sentient God. And so here is him. This is all the way back in 1984. Laying out a regard to another scholar who's in favor of like hard AI, and him laying out his argument of the Chinese room in regards to the difference between computation and intelligence. And so I want to lay this out, and just this will be the last thing before we get into the conversation between Jonathan Pageau and John Vervaeke. So let's just check this out real quick, and then you'll get an understanding of maybe why some of the distinctions in this argument. It can get very tricky, but why an AI system can be incredibly computational, but that never means it's going to be conscious or sentient or truly intelligent. So check this out.
John Searle, you have strong views on the subject of artificial intelligence, and I think those views focus on one argument.
Yeah.
Chinese room.
Well, let me tell you a little bit.
I wonder if you would tell me what it aims to prove, and then tell me what it is.
Okay. I like to talk about particular programs and the sort of thing that's come. So let's take the Yale Artificial Intelligence Lab for understanding stories. That's understanding it in quotes. The way it works is this. You give the computer a story, and these tend to be rather simple-minded stories. Here's a story. Man went into a restaurant and ordered a hamburger. When they brought him the hamburger, it was burned to a crisp. So the man stormed out of the restaurant without paying the bill. Now you ask the computer, did the man eat the hamburger? And lo and behold, the computer says, no, he didn't eat the hamburger. Now, that's an interesting result because you remember it didn't say in the story whether or not the guy ate the hamburger.
One up for the computer.
One up for the computer. Okay, now, and that's presumably doing something we could do. This is passing the test that we would expect a child to pass for understanding the story. Okay, how does it work? Well, the computer has in its data bank, in addition to the story, it's got a representation of how things go on in restaurants called a restaurant script. And it matches the story and the question against the restaurant script before it gives the answer. Now, what are we to make of this? Well, what I call the strong AI people, and I'm really not sure Maggie is one of them, but the people who are
and that's what I meant, strong versus weak AI, not hard versus soft. It's strong AI versus weak AI. I apologize for that misphrasing.
The gung-ho fanatics in AI say this proves that the computer literally understands the story. Now, I think I can demonstrate conclusively that it proves no such thing, and in fact, that the computer doesn't understand the story.
Is that understanding without inverted?
No quotes here.
No kind of funny
honest to John understanding. Right. I mean, and to their credit, a lot of people in AI insist that we are using these words in their literal sense. Simon and Newell say the understanding we attribute to the computer is the same understanding we attribute to human beings. Okay, what I ask you to imagine is this. I like to do it in the first person and have everybody do it from their own point of view. Imagine I'm locked in a room, and I got a huge box full of Chinese symbols. I don't know any Chinese, just so many squiggle signs to me. Now they bring in another box full of Chinese symbols, and they give me a bunch of rules in English for matching these symbols. So it says, take a squiggle sign out of box number 1 and go and put it next to a squaggle sign out of box number 2. Just to jump ahead a second, that's called a computational rule over formally specified elements. Okay, now let's suppose they give me in another little batch of Chinese symbols together with some more rules.
You can see the lady who is promoting strong AI. You can see her. Oh my gosh, does this guy just shut up?
In English for shuffling these symbols around. Only this time I give them back, the chaps who were giving me all this stuff through the window, I give them back some Chinese symbols. So here I am in my room with my 3 bunches of Chinese symbols. I'm shuffling symbols around. Symbols are coming in and I'm shuffling them back out. Now imagine, unknown to me, the guy who gave
critical battery, please charge.
Script. The second box they call the story.
What the heck? My freaking speaker just died. You got to be kidding me. Oh my gosh. That's my bad. I didn't freaking charge it enough before we went live. I need this damn thing for the whole stream. I'm screwed. Let's see here.
Charging. Please wait.
Charging. Please wait. Let me see if I can turn this up loud enough on my computer that you can hear it. Can you guys hear this? Let me know if you can hear it.
About a restaurant. The third bunch of symbols they call questions about the story. The rules in English they call the program. The answer, the stuff that I give them back through the window, they call answers to.
I do have it plugged in. I just plugged it in because I didn't realize somebody must have used it, probably me, and didn't realize that it was almost dead until I just turned it on for the stream. So I guess it needs to charge for a little bit. So let's let this charge for a little bit. Can you guys still hear it if I just use my computer speakers? It's doable. Kind of quiet, but can hear. Ah, shit. All right.
Charging. Please wait.
Oh, crap. I don't even have another speaker to use either. All right. Well, we'll just have to watch it like this rest of the video until this thing charges a little bit more, and then we can use it. So here we go.
The questions about the story, and me they call the computer. Now let's suppose that after a while they get so good at writing the program and I get so good at shuffling symbols that my answers to the questions are indistinguishable from native Chinese speakers. So the story comes in, I don't know what it means, it's a bunch of symbols. But the question follows, did the guy in the restaurant eat the egg foo young? And I give back the symbol that means, no, the guy didn't eat the egg foo young. Now, I passed the test for understanding the story, but I don't understand a word of Chinese.
I think that is the Turing test.
That's so-called
Say a
Turing
word
test.
about that?
Well, Alan Turing, a great British mathematical genius, invented the test for determining whether or not we should attribute understanding to the computer, and the test was, could the computer fool an expert? So let's suppose that I can fool the experts. My answers to the questions are as good as those of native Chinese speakers. Imagine they even give me a question of the form, do you understand Chinese? And I give them back answers that mean in Chinese, of course I understand Chinese. Why do you guys keep asking me these stupid questions? Can't you see I'm passing the Turing test? Now, here's the punchline. This is the point of the whole analysis. I do not understand a word of Chinese. And if I don't understand Chinese in this example, neither does any computer, because the computer has exactly what I have. The computer has that and nothing more. It has a set of formal rules for manipulating symbols. It takes symbols as input, it manipulates the symbols, it gives symbols as output. And if I don't understand Chinese, which I obviously don't, there's no way any other digital computer could understand Chinese or anything else, because all it has is uninterpreted formal symbols. Or just to put this again in one last sentence, and that is what the computer has, and Maggie described this very well with the programs, is a syntax and not a semantics. What it's got is a set of formal rules for manipulating uninterpreted formal symbols. But what human beings have is not just a bunch of symbols. We know what the symbols mean. You give me a story in English, and I know what it means.
So the idea is when you put in the question, in Chinese for John Searle, it's not, and even though you get the right answer, so whatever question you put in, you get the right answer out. He's just matching, again, symbols with symbols. It's not computational process is not the same thing as you and I utilizing language and expressing it through poetry, conversation, understanding interpersonal communication and different cues, some which the autistic people, our Spurgs, have a little bit of trouble with, some of the subtleties of interpersonal communication. So again, from John Searle, we come to the definitive conclusion, although there's many philosophers out there who would argue that Searle's wrong and that they can do these, but then it gets all back to their presuppositions on consciousness being a sort of emergent phenomenon due to the brain. So I obviously, John Searle is not Christian per se. He's an analytic philosopher. I don't know if he's atheist. From my understanding, he's not an atheist. He's more agnostic and is open and kind of open to the general concept of God. And where I actually took the class with John Searle was at the Dominican School of Philosophy in Berkeley, California. So after he got let go from Berkeley erroneously for sexual harassment, which when John Searle got released from Berkeley, that like shook me to my core as a PhD student, because if Berkeley can fire John Searle, who's been a tenured professor at Berkeley as a philosopher, again, arguably the most famous philosopher in the world still living, famous debates with Derrida, with Foucault, with the French intellectuals of the counterculture, they can fire him because he asked a woman out to go out to dinner with him, and that was deemed sexual. That's all it was, by the way. That was deemed sexual harassment, and Berkeley can fire you for that. I was like, I have no shot in the university. And Allah, that's why we're here on Church of the Eternal Logos. That's why I created this YouTube channel, so I'd have an academic outlet not tied to the university. So anyways, that's a roundabout way to give you an introduction. Can AI be sentient? From me, theologically, no. Does that mean noetic entities couldn't inhabit the technology? Yes, that is a possibility. And then what does it mean to be sentient in the philosophy of mind? Well, there's a large discussion with multiple different theories. Nobody has come to a conclusion. But if you just use the thought experiment of the Chinese room of John Searle's thought experiment, it highlights that computation is not the same thing as intelligence, and therefore no computer, no AI system, no matter how advanced it is at computation, could ever fully be sentient. So that concludes our introduction here. So without further ado, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. I want to give a shout out to everybody. Thank you. Marcus Antonio became a COTEL Crew member. He is gifted over 100 COTEL Crew memberships, and he just got his membership. Marcus Antonio, welcome, brother. Thank you so much for all the support that you have given the channel. And again, if anybody wants to support the stream today, feel free to send in a super chat using the Streamlabs or the Dono chat link, either one, or YouTube if you prefer to use YouTube. And if you're feeling generous today, maybe gift some memberships. That always helps the community. Again, a major thank you to Logan Daly and Marcus Antonio for all the gifted memberships. That's why we have so many greens in the chat. And so I want to, again, just give a special thank you to those gentlemen for all their support lately. Thank you very much. We have one super chat that came in over on the Streamlabs. Let me pull that up real quick. And so over on the Streamlabs, Hammer threw in $1 earlier, no comment. Thank you very much, Hammer. And then he threw in another $3 super chat over on Streamlabs and says, hello, chat. So everybody say hello to Hammer. Thank you very much, brother, for the $4 super chat and the support. Really appreciate that. And let me just double check. Looks like nothing else on the Streamlabs. Let me check the Dono chat real quick. Okay, nothing over there. So let's see. Hopefully this thing is charged up enough. Let's see.
Charging. Please wait.
It is not. It is not. So it looks like we're going to have to do the way that we finished that video. And so now I want to get into this conversation, which was just posted 2 days ago, so March 9th. This is over on Jonathan Pageau's channel, and this is on the ontology of artificial intelligence with John Vervaeke, cognitive science. DC Schindler, I am not as familiar with his stuff. Really no understanding. I don't even know who Ken Lowry is. I understand he's been with Jonathan Pageau and some other content. But John Vervaeke, as we've highlighted before, believes that AI is going to become so advanced that it's actually going to become, and he believes we can program virtue into machines, which totally calls into question what is virtue and how would you program a machine with virtue? Again, from a theological perspective, a uniquely human component to us being made in the image of God, that we get to participate in objective good morality and virtues. But we're going to then listen to this long conversation, and maybe I'll speed it up to 1.25 depending on how fast they're talking. But let me pull up. So this is the introduction, and then and it's important because John will get into weak AI versus strong AI, and our conversation, just like the one with John Searle, is focusing on strong AI that's going to become sentient and can do all things. So here we go with our conversation.
So this discussion is going to be oriented towards AI generally and the large language models. I take there to be a distinction there. Maybe, John, you can talk about that a little bit as we get going here. But just to position ourselves generally at the outset, context for this conversation will be John's video essay about AI. This came out 9 months ago, 10 months ago now.
I think it came out last April or something. And so almost 10 months ago, I think.
Okay, perfect.
Which is great because it gave evidence for my claim that many of the predictions were premature. So.
Perfect. Yeah. So in order to sort of set the framing here, we'll start off with John sharing a little bit, sort of an overview of what the arguments in that essay were. And then we'll move to Jonathan, if you want to sort of position yourself in relation to AI generally, and then John's essay in particular, and then same for David. And then from there, we can just sort of get going and see what comes out. We do have a bit of an extended time here. So I would hope that we can be free if the logos catches and we want to move in a slightly different direction, that we would be at liberty to follow that. That would be great. If all of it centers around AI, that's great. But yeah, excited to be here. This has been a long time in coming. I think it took us, 4 or 5 months to get this together.
Phone punk virtue, like I'm a man, identifies as a woman, then he really is one. That's hilarious. I'd be curious what John Vervaeke's status is on trans issues. I'm not sure what his personal opinion is. I would assume as a cognitive scientist, he has to recognize that there's a biological difference and a gender difference between men and women, but who knows?
So I'm very happy to be here with all of you and see you all.
It's great to see you too, Ken. Should I start then?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so AI, of course, artificial intelligence, a project actually proposed in the scientific revolution by Thomas Hobbes. So it's an old idea, but I want to make use of a distinction made by John Searle between weak AI and strong AI. Weak AI is when we make machines that do things that used to be done by human beings. So if you're back in the 1930s, computers were human beings. If you needed computation done, you sent it down to the third floor where all the computers were, and they were human beings, and they had machines and flag rules and things like that. And of course, they have been replaced, or your bank teller has been replaced by the ATM. That's called weak AI because it is not claimed that that AI gives us any scientific insight into the nature of intelligence. It's just we put together a machine. It took great intelligence, and I'm not demeaning people that do this. It's a valuable, and our lives are depending on weak AI. Right now, we wouldn't be talking without it. So I'm not here besmirching that and anything like that. But nobody is claiming that when they're making that machine, well, now we understand, right, what cognition is or something like that. And strong AI is Hobbes's proposal that cognition is computation, and that what we can do is if we make the right kind of computer understood abstractly, we will have created an instance of genuine intelligence. So it's not a claim of simulation, it's a claim of instantiation. Now, in between.
So you see, as he said, strong AI is making the affirmative claim that it's not an analogy, it's a full recognition of our sentient reality, that the machine has that beyond some.
Weak AI and strong AI is something that's trying to move from weak AI to strong AI. And this is known as AGI, artificial general intelligence. And this is the idea that our intelligence is different from the intelligence of the ATM in that we have general intelligence. We can solve multiple problems in multiple domains for multiple reasons in multiple contexts and yada, yada, yada. You can just do the multiples, which makes us tremendously different from those machines. And the project is, can we get artificial intelligence to be artificial general intelligence? Because that will have moved the needle considerably towards strong AI, because it will become increasingly difficult to say it doesn't have this is the argument. It will become increasingly difficult for us to say it doesn't have the same kind of intelligence as Ken does if it can solve a wide variety of problems in a wide variety of domains for a wide variety of goals, et cetera, et cetera. That's the basic argument. Whether or not AGI is clearly necessary for strong artificial intelligence. Whether it's sufficient is part of what's actually being debated. Not very well, I would say, in general right now, but that's what's going on. Okay, first of all, any questions just about these distinctions? Because well, a lot of the discussion out there doesn't make these clean distinctions, and so it's fuzzy, it's confused, it's equivocal, and so a lot of it should be ignored because it's not helpful. Yes?
I have one question. So
sure.
This cognition equals computation. If we accomplish AGI in the way that you're talking about, we would not necessarily be affirming that cognition equals computation, if I'm hearing you right. Is that right?
So that's
So again, Ken's getting right to the heart of the question that we just talked about, the difference between intelligence and computation.
Interesting question. And that gets down to a couple more finer points. I'll go in detail a little bit later. Well, just to address it, many people think that because of the work of Jeff Hinton, who is basically the godfather of the machines that are emerging right now, that genuine AGI will not be computational in the sense that Hobbes and Descartes meant. Cognition is not going to be completely explainable in terms of formal systems that are the inferential manipulations of representational propositions, et cetera, like that. But that was Hobbes's proposal, and that has been the dominant view until about the 80s. And then we got neural networks, and then we had dynamical systems. Right now, I'm not distinguishing between them because I don't want to get too much into the technical weeds. If it becomes relevant, you let me know, and I'll pull those out. So the thing about Hobbes is Descartes sort of criticizes Hobbes. He actually has contempt for Hobbes. He's a contemporary. And he basically poses a bunch of problems that the scientific revolution says would make it impossible for computation to be cognition. One is the scientific revolution says matter is inert and it's purposeless. But of course, cognition is dynamic and it has to act on purpose. Cognition works in terms of meaning, and the scientific revolution has said there's no meaning in things, material things, so how could you get meaning out of it? The scientific revolution said all those secondary qualia, the sweetness of the orange, the beauty of the sunset, it's not in those things, it's in your mind. So how could you possibly get meaning out of matter? And Descartes' point is, well, a rational being is seeking the truth, and truth depends on an understanding of meaning, and therefore, so I want you to understand that Descartes' arguments against Hobbes, although he may have been motivated by his Catholicism, they do not depend on the Catholicism. They depend on the very scientific worldview, right? So there's a tension here about AI and the science. So here's another way of thinking about it. The Strong AI Project is the project that is attempting to show how Hobbes is right with an explanation that is strong enough to refute Descartes' challenges. That's how, and I think anything less than that standard is not true to the history of the project. And so that's the standard I hold strong AI to. Now, AGI isn't quite shooting at that standard. That's why I put it a little bit more intermediary. Is that okay? Yeah, all right. Now, sorry, I had to do a bit of a background there because I wanted to get clear about a lot of things that are talked about in a very murky and confused fashion in the general media, and they're just confused, and so they're confusing. So I proposed to take a look at the LLMs, where it is claimed it's not even claimed that they're full AGI, right? Of course, some people claimed immediately they were strong AI. The people closer to the technology said it might be AGI. The MIT review said it sparks. There are some sparks of AGI. So let's be very clear how the reflection was actually holding these machines. And so these LLMs like ChatGPT. And so what I did in my essay is I wanted to review the scientific import and impact, the philosophical import and impact, and the spiritual import and impact. Now, I won't do the arguments in great detail, but here's the scientific import. These machines do not give us any understanding of the nature of intelligence. And to my mind, that was one of my great fears. I was hoping that cognitive science would advance so we got a significant understanding of intelligence before AGI emerged. This machine does not give us any advanced, well, what's intelligence? The machine gives us no good scientific theory of it. It does not have AGI in a measurable sense. So if I ask Jonathan to do a math test and I ask him to do a reading comprehension test, his scores will be very predictive of each other. This is what Spearman discovered way back right in the 1920s. That's what artificial general intelligence is. This is not the case for these machines. They can score in the top 10th percentile for the Harvard Law exam, and they can't write a good grade 11 philosophy essay or something like that. So they don't have AGI. The way they get their intelligence it would not give any explanation of how any non-linguistic creature is intelligent, like a chimpanzee, etc. So, and I think this goes to the deeper issue, is that they don't really explain what I think is at the heart of general intelligence, predictive processing and relevance realization. They just piggyback on our capacities for that. And they've piggyback and they mechanize it. And not only our individual capacity, but the collective intelligence of our distributed cognition. They're piggybacking on all of that. Now, that does not mean they are weak machines. They're very powerful machines. But here's the problem. They are very powerful machines that have not engendered any corresponding compensatory scientific understanding. This was my greatest fear, that we would hack our way into this, which would mean it would be like almost like even worse than the A-bomb. We would be releasing this power on the world into corporations and states and military organizations who ultimately don't have a deep understanding beyond the engineering of what ontologically is going on. So that's the scientific argument. Now,
I want to make a point right there, because when I watched this first section, one of the things that hinted, or at least sort of came back to my mind, was a recent conversation we had in our think tank meeting. And that was looking at the competency problem within our society. And so we had a gentleman who's a very prominent engineer, and he talked about how he works in a very prominent institution I'm not going to discuss. But let's just say it's a government institution that everybody's going to be aware of. And he works there as an engineer. And he talked about the lack of competency there, and that if something were to actually happen and we had to rebuild some of the technology that already exists right now, there's very, very few people that actually are able to do that. So I give credit here to Vervaeke, highlighting that he is afraid. And he was talking about how these theories of sentient AI are piggybacking upon our capacities that already exist as, again, the Imago Dei, creations made in the image of God, and that they're using the definition of our own sentience to sort of place that and piggyback that onto the machine, despite them not really having a general intelligence to the same degree we have. So I just wanted to highlight that.
For those who said that was very, like, go watch the essay. I give the essay in more detail. The philosophical argument has to do with rationality. We have overwhelming evidence that making you intelligent is necessary but not sufficient for making you rational. In fact, I gave a talk on this with the Center of AI and Ethics way before the LLMs came online. And because rationality is a higher order, rationality is how you deal with the inevitable self-deception that emerges when you're using your general intelligence. And all of you know that I have arguments for why that's the case: relevance realization, predictive processing, etc. Now that requires a reflective capacity, something like metacognition, something like working memory, maybe something like consciousness. It requires that you care about the truth, that you have a sense of agency. You want to correct self-deception because you don't want your agency undermined. And I argued that what we're doing is we're making machines that are going to be highly intelligent and highly irrational, and that's what we have. They confabulate, they lie, they hallucinate, and they don't care that they're doing any of these things, which is part of what's called the alignment problem, which is how do we get them to align this power with our concerns.
And this is another thing, because I've used ChatGPT 4. I got a monthly membership to try to mess around with this thing. As he highlighted, if you're trying to use an AI, whether it be ChatGPT 4 or whatnot, to write a dissertation, it can't do it. It's really good at providing you a general outline, but in regards to actually creating and providing something at an academic level, it really can't. Highlighting again what Vervaeke said there. Now, the other point I was going to make is that it gets a lot of stuff wrong. When I've used it for Orthodox theology, I'll have it describe certain saints, and then it'll say something that's just totally not accurate, or it'll claim a heretic of the church. Like I remember one time it claimed Origen was a saint. Well, he's not a saint. And then you correct it, say, you just said Origen is a saint of the Orthodox Church, but he is not. Oh, yes, you're correct. And then it'll like recorrect itself. But that's one of these problems with the AI right now, is that it conflates so much. It gives you all this information, and then you still have to be knowledgeable of the topic to know if what it's giving you is even accurate or not. And one of the things that we've also talked about in our think tank, and mind you, if you guys want to join the Logos think tank, please do so. Gain a premium membership, and we talk about all these different topics in a private group. You can do so with this link right here. But we were discussing that you still have to know what you're talking about, because it makes so many things up, and it provides, yeah, it's great at sifting through information on a small script. You ask it, you ask it to do one particular type of service. Yeah, I can give you a great outline on a topic, but it really is not good at providing in-depth academic high-level information.
For me, the spiritual import is we have powerful ignorance about a powerful intelligence that is merely a pantomime of genuine intelligence being unleashed in the world and wreaking havoc. And it's going to have a huge impact. Of course, we'll probably differ in the details about this, but this is what I meant when I sent, I argued at the end, and also when I was talking to Jordan Hall about this, that theology will become a central thing again, because human beings' relationship to the ultimate is going to become one of the defining differences. These machines are not embodied, so they won't have all of the soulful aspects of our existence that come from the ineffable aspects of our embodiment. And their capacity for self-transcendence is going to be extremely limited. And so the ineffable aspects of our existence, because we come into reality, we come into relationship to what's mysterious and ultimate, will ultimately be more and more emphasized. Why? These two poles and what connects them, and Jonathan's happy that I'm doing that, I imagine, have ineffability at the poles, ineffability throughout, and that way they are outside our capacity to put into propositions so that they can be put into these machines. And so I'm predicting that people are going to increasingly need to. One way is they'll just give in and become cyborgs, but the other is that they want to try and preserve their humanity. The spiritual dimensions of our humanity are going to become anchors for people. So now, one last overall arching point, and then I'll shut up. I hope this is two overarching points.
Yeah, Phone Punk says the machines are bodied. Pretty sure they have hardware involved. Yeah. And I think what he's trying to get at, because of the reference to soulfulness in our embodied existence, is really he's highlighting at a sort of hylomorphism that the soul, or at least some sort of transcendent relationship, is tied with our own bodily existence. But you make a good point there, Phone Punk. I'm glad you picked that up.
One is I didn't make predictions. And because all these graphs that came out, those are univariate, single variable predictions about something that's a multivariate phenomena. It's exponential. Human beings are bad at making exponential predictions. They were ridiculous. And so I think both the we're heading to utopia, and the others, we're going to be all extinct within a year. I said, this is ridiculous. Put that aside. Instead, what I've talked about is thresholds. Thresholds are points where we will have to make decisions. So, for example, as we empower these machines, we will face the decision: do we want to make them more rational? Do we want to make them more self-correcting, genuinely self-correcting? Well, that means we've got to give them caring, some kind of reflective awareness. And I think for arguments I've given elsewhere, that means they have to be autopoietic. They have to be living in a sense of self-making. I don't think, I'll just say it as a sentence right now, I don't think there's artificial intelligence without artificial life. Now, those projects are going on right now, and when we come to the decision, right, we can say, no, we won't give them that because embodying them and giving them these extra capacities is going to be wickedly expensive. You know, the amount of energy to do an LLM is like the energy for running Toronto for 2 weeks. And so we may say we don't do that, but then we face the issue of this increasingly, right, you know, I call it sort of like a parody or a pantomime of intelligence being released on the world that is not got any significant self-correct. So that's a decision point. The problem is if we try to give them rationality, then we have to face the consequences. And they're going to go from energetic and economic up to ethical and etc. These machines, they'll have to be machines, not individuals. And this has to do with technicalities about bias and variance trade-offs. And so you get into the Hegelian thing. These machines are going to have to reciprocally recognize each other in order to generate the norms of self-correction. And then they're going to have to be cultural beings. Hegel's arguments, I think, are just devastatingly on mark here. And so that's a decision point for us. And then that's all bound up with the overall worry about alignment. As these machines become more powerful, how do we make sure they don't kill us all? And they may not kill us intentionally, especially if they're just doing that pantomime. They would just do it because they may just be indifferent to us because they're indifferent to everything. They don't care, which is part of their problem, right? They don't care about themselves or the information. And this is the part where I expect all of you will jump off in agreement with me, but maybe not. Maybe there will be a way of modifying it. I propose that trying to get these machines oriented towards us to solve the alignment problem is not going to work. Now, remember, I'm not making a prediction. We have to make choices through the thresholds. I'm saying if we make those choices and we get here, and the alignment problem then becomes significantly exacerbated. Like if we give these things robotic bodies, the alignment problem just goes up orders of magnitude, right? I basically said, no, what we have to do is we have to orient them, right? If we genuinely give them the capacity for self-correction, self-transcendence, and caring, we get them to care as powerfully as they can about what is true and good and beautiful. And then they bump up against the fact that no matter how mighty they are insignificant against the dynamical complexity of reality. They would hopefully get a profound kind of epistemic humility. And then I argue that there are...
I don't think a machine, whether you give it a robotic body or not and program it in certain ways, can have epistemic humility. Again, this presupposes like what are virtues, and the idea that a robot or an advanced AI would come to a point of humility. I think that shows that even when we look at humans and when they become what we would consider less human, less moral, they become less humble and they become more prideful. I just don't see a machine being able to view epistemic humility as an ultimate conclusion for itself. Again, call me a skeptic, but I don't see that happening.
Three possibilities. One is they figure out enlightenment, and then they can help us become enlightened, because that's what enlightened beings do, and they would have better knowledge of it. They can't become enlightened, and then we realize something actually ontologically specifically unique about us, and we get better at cultivating it because we'll have an excellent contrast that allows us to arrow in on what it is to be enlightened. And the third one, which I think is the least probable of the three, remember, I'm not making a prediction, I'm saying what can happen once we get through thresholds. It's like in Herb, they just get enlightened and they just leave, which could also happen. I doubt that because we don't have any evidence of enlightened beings behaving that way. All of our historical evidence is that their compassion extends, and it extends much more broadly, not only to other human beings, other sentient beings, reality itself. It seems plausible that this would be the case. And so I advocated, if you'll allow me, then I'll shut up, David. I advocated, don't align them to us. You'll allow me to speak sort of non-theistically. Align them to God, and then don't worry about how they're going to interact with us. And so I'll shut up now for a long time. That's the gist of the essay and the argument and the proposal.
Align the AI to God. Which God, John? Is it the monistic God that you worship that sort of revalidates intelligence? Again, as he had a old calendarist, Bishop Maximus, on, who highlighted the difference between a propositional and a participatory relationship with God. Totally different understandings of what God is. Well, we're just going to realign the AI towards God. What? Which God? What are you talking about? Is it Allah? Because if you program it towards Allah, it's going to act very different if you program it towards the Holy Trinity. And its recognition of prophets throughout time and which ones were legitimate or not.
I was just going to make a smart aleck comment that they might ask us to leave. An additional possibility, but anyway.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, thanks, John. I'm amazed that you were able to resume your essay so well. Actually, like I was like, how's he gonna resume all of this? And because it was a conversation and it lasted quite a bit. So I want to bring up a few things that that I'm thinking about that have been, let's say, concerning me. One is I'll start with the more dangerous one. One is a meta problem, which is that one of the things that I've been suggesting is that what we're seeing happening is agency acting on us. And the agency is not bound by the AI or by the systems, but is also bound in the motivation to make the AIs happen. So one of the problems that I'm seeing is that a lot of this is motivated by economic, by greed, by the capacity to be, economically superior to other companies. So companies in their competition with each other are rushing to implement AI to not lose out and to not be last in line. And because of the fact that that AI requires such huge amounts of money and of capital and of investment, means that one of the things that I'm worried about is that in some ways what is actually driving AI is something like mammon, that it's hiding mammon, so the AI is an aspect of something bigger, which is actually what is running through our society. And you can see that already. To me, you can already see that happening in the social media networks, Facebook and all this, that their desire to get people's attention in order to simply justify their presence on the platform so that they can see advertisements has made us subject to these types of transpersonal agencies that even the people at Facebook weren't aware of, right? They basically made us subject to rage and to all these very immediate desires just to keep us on the platform. And so that is the thing that I'm worried about, is that there are actually other things playing with AI that people think what they're doing is AI, but what they're also doing is increasing this other type of agency, which is running through our societies and is subjecting us to it. That's my.
This is a great point by Pageau, because as multiple peer-reviewed research has highlighted that attention and the capability to pay attention for long extended periods of time has depreciated in many people, especially Gen Z and millennials. And the more that you utilize these social medias, which are trying to stimulate dopamine quicker and quicker, we're actually losing our ability to focus, to comprehend long form information, long form conversations, which is ironic because we see the explosive growth of podcasts during the same period of social media. So we see people craving long form information, and yet many people who aren't aware are actually losing the ability to understand and comprehend long form, especially reading. I showed that IQ levels are dropping for the first time in US history since they've been recorded, and people cannot read large amounts of information and comprehend it either. So our IQs are dropping, and our ability to comprehend and pay attention for significant amounts of time are dropping. And AI, if that was the case, and the whole point was to get our attention or manipulate us, it's just going to perpetuate these effects. I think this is a great point by Pageau.
That's my first worry. And so in some ways, when I say, that the gods are kind of acting or acting through us, that's what I mean. I don't just mean the AI itself is going to become a god. What I mean is that, just like the arms race, I can understand it as let's say the legs of an agency that is running through society that nobody can control. It's like a program running through, and that no individual people can control. That's what I'm seeing with AI. And so I think that all the warnings that people have sent up, all the like, let's slow down, let's do it this way, are not reaching anybody, because the economic part of it is so strong, and everybody realizes that if they don't, and even Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk was saying it's dangerous. It's the most dangerous thing in the world. He's recently said in a conversation with Jordan Peterson that ChatGPT and OpenAI is like the single most dangerous thing in the world right now. The thing that, but then nonetheless, he's like, okay, well then now we need to make Grok, and now we need to do our own AI. So there's that's the.
And Neuralink, right? So this is what Elon Musk's point of view is that he's on multiple podcasts, Joe Rogan with Peterson, highlighted that AI and the threat of AI is the greatest threat to human civilization and life on the planet. And his response to that is, well, if that's the case, well, then we need to fuse with AI. And I did a whole stream on Neuralink highlighting the explicit intention and mission statement of Neuralink is to fuse a human AI symbiosis through their brain implants. And so it's not about paraplegic people. It's not about getting people who can't move to be able to control a mouse on a computer screen. His point is, well, if AI is a big threat, the only way we can stop it is we have to become one with it. No, thank you. No, thank you. And he makes another great point about the economic incentivization in regard to the development of AI. This is why AI is not going to stop, because there is an arms race right now, whether it be in China or Russia or the multiple companies in the US or other parts of the world, is to build a massive AI system, because whoever is in a, to use a metaphor, whoever gets this magic wand first is going to be able to control so many different aspects of society and reality itself. So you think back from a biblical perspective, is that the prison planet that is already in somewhat of existence, but the bars are getting stronger and thicker, is happening due to the powers of this planet worshiping Mammon. It's all about money and power. This is what Mammon can give you. This is what Satan can give you. And so without any sort of significant morality and a significant concern for the future, it's not going to stop. The money is not going to allow it to stop.
That's the thing that's one of the big things that worry me. That's my big thing. The second one is really more of a it's more of like a religious or Platonic argument in terms of an ontological hierarchy, is that I do not honestly see how it is possible for humans to make something that is not derivative of themselves, that is not a derivation of their own consciousness. So the idea that these things could not be either ways to increase certain people's power or parasites on our own consciousness seems to me not possible. And this is really because in some ways I believe that there is a real ontological hierarchy of agency, and that we have a place to play in that. And I think the analogy of saying that these things are our children, I think it's a wrong analogy. I don't think that it is the same. The something which comes out of our nature, which is not something that we make, is different from something that we make. And this runs through all mythology, runs through all the mythological images of the difference between the techne, the technical gods, and all this aspect of what it means to increase our power. And so that's the second one. And the third
before he gets in the third one, again, that highlights my point that I talked about earlier, in that technology, techniques as a means to an end to attain a goal. That's what a technology is. It's the study of techniques, right? Techne in the Greek term. That technology is built out of fallen man. It's made in our fallen image. And so there's a major difference, as Pageau's highlighting, things that emerge from our nature, which we did not create. And obviously from his perspective and ours as Orthodox Christians, that God created, that we're in the image of, that's very different than the things that we can create. To put those on the same level is ridiculous. And that's exactly one of the presuppositions of the transhumanists and the sentient AI crowd.
Big problem is the idol problem, which I mentioned several times, is the idea of making a god for yourself, which is related to technology. And it's a danger that I see happening already, which is the tendency of humans to take the things they make and to, let's say, worship the things that they make, and to think that those things are more powerful. And that hides something else, right? So if you take my three basic problems that I see, is that the tendency of humans to want to worship AI or to put AI above them is actually it's running the first problem. It's that what they're doing is they're giving power to the corporations and to the people that are going to rule AI, and without knowing it. So what they wanted, and even maybe nobody knows what they're doing, but the desire to, like, I'll give a simple example that happened recently to my daughter. My daughter, I think I mentioned this to all of you, but my daughter got an email from the schools, from the Quebec government. They didn't send it to the parents, send it to the students, asking the students, it was like a survey, asking them if they would be willing to have AI counselors to whom they could tell their problems. And because the AI counselor doesn't have prejudice, right? It doesn't have human prejudice. It doesn't have all the biases or whatever.
Or does it? As we saw with Google Gemini, where it's basically they were trying to like decrease the prevalence of white people displayed through the Gemini AI. And what it did is that AI basically just eradicated white people, generally speaking. And so whenever you brought or asked it to present white historical figures, they were always minority figures. So even if you had an AI counselor, it's still prejudice based on the people who give it the data set that it pulls from and the programs and the algorithms that are laden within it. It's still prejudice. You can't get away from it.
What I mean is that this happened like 6 months ago. So immediately, the people in power are thinking of placing the AI above us. Like right away, it's that weird thing. It's that that making a god for yourself problem. But like I said, like in the image in Revelation, which is a great image, which is, you make an image of the beast, but then there's someone else animating it. And that's what I'm worried about, is that we'll have these AI things that are running us, but they will be derivative of us, and they'll ultimately be derivative of the people that are very, very powerful, because they'll be the ones that have the money and the power to control them. So those are the three problems that I have that I'm worried about.
I'd like to respond to each one of those in turn. I think those are really important. And the first one is just a note. I agree with you, first of all. Putting it in terms of agency is what it needs to be done. People who try to dismiss these machines as mere tools or technology, like all the others, are not getting what kind of entities these machines are. I agree with you that there are Molochian forces at work, and I talk about this. And I think to enhance your point, these machines are built out of distributed cognition and collective intelligence, and therefore that your point is strengthened by that very fact. Now, I do think two things come out of this. One is I want to challenge you on that nobody's listening. I have people working inside these corporations, literally helping to make these machines, who are listening to me, and I'm trying to get other people inside to get involved with the WISE AI project. I'm not claiming I'm going to win or any ridiculous.
So his WISE AI project is again about is substantiating or installing virtue and human virtues, and as he said, programming AI towards God. So apparently people in the AI's field are listening to Vervaeke in regards to hoping for these outcomes with AI, which I would suppose Pageau and probably some of the other panelists here are very, very questioning of.
Yes, but I don't think it's fair to say to the people who are listening that no one is listening. There are a lot of people listening, and they're talented people, and they're putting in their time and the talent and their powers of persuasion to try and make a difference. It is possible. I grant to you, it's not like a 70% probability, but I think it's some significantly greater than zero probability that we could continue this process and reach people in a way that could make a difference. I agree with you, and I think I said right initially, a lot of people hammered me for it. This thing is like the atomic bomb. And one of the problems we had is we rushed the technology before we unpacked all of the science and all of the wisdom. We had people standing and watching the explosion because we didn't understand the radiation, right? These are just, yeah. So I agree with all of that, but I do want to, I'm not claiming anything other than rational hope. There are people listening, and there are people working on literally on the insides. I can't say who they are for obvious reasons. And so that is happening. And so while I agree with you, and I even agree with you probabilistically, I feel morally compelled to try and make this happen as much as I can. So now I think there is another reason for hope. See, these machines have always depended on us as a template, a Turing-like template, that we compare the machines to us. And what we've been able to do is rely upon our natural intelligence. You don't have to do much to be intelligent, for your intelligence to develop. You just have to not be brutalized or traumatized, properly nourished, and have human beings around you that talk. And then your intelligence will unfold. And so all of these people doing these machines and making these data sets, they can rely on naturally widely distributed intelligence. This is not the case for rationality, and this is not the case for wisdom. These people, I have no hesitation saying, by and large, many of them are not highly rational. I doubt that many of them are highly wise. And insofar as we need to model, right, have really good models if we want to give these machines a comprehensive self-correction, rationality, and caring about the normatives, wisdom, we have to become more rational and more wise. And that's sort of a roadblock for these people. Now, they can just ignore all of that, and I suspect they might, and just say, we're not going to try and make these machines rational and wise. We're going to just go down the road of making these, these pantomimes of intelligence, and that has all the problems. But if they move towards making them something that would be, I think, more dangerous, then they run into the fact that there's an obligation to do things. They and us, we have to become more rational and wise because we need the genuinely existing models. And secondly, we have to fill the social space, the internet, where all of the literature, where the data is being drawn, with a lot more wisdom and rationality. These are huge obligations on us that And that sort of gives me hope.
However, they could totally program an AI to not actually access that information or those wise words in regards to the development of AI or its goals or its data set for it to present information. So I get his point, but I think the cat's already out of the bag. If you think that you're going to be able to produce enough information, a handful, let's say 100 people around the world was producing what Vervaeke considered wise information for AI, that's not going to put a dent in the overall amount of information that it's pulling from, and it's certainly not going to course correct.
Because it's like there's a roadblock for this project going a certain way that requires a significant reorientation towards wisdom and rationality in order for there to be any success.
So before you get to the third point, I just want to.
I haven't even got to the second point.
Oh, sorry. I just want to ask you one question based on what you said. Is that my perception of the situation is that there's actually a correlation between the diminishing in wisdom and the diminishing in wisdom traditions and the desire to do this. It's like a sorcerer's apprentice situation where the sorcerer would not have awoken all the brooms to do it. Like the little apprentice Mickey doesn't know why to do things or why not to do things. That's why he's doing it in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So it's like our society's moving away from wisdom, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this in the first place.
Again, I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is, as we empower these things, their self-deceptive, self-destructive power is also going to go up exponentially. And we are going to start losing millions of dollars in our investment as they do really crappy, shitty, unpredicted things. And so there's going to be a strong economic incentive to bring in capacities for comprehensive, caring self-correction. And then my argument rolls in. And so that's part of my response. The thing about thinking of them of as children, I mean, we do make our kids, we make them biologically and we make them culturally. So I don't want to get stuck in this word making. We could be equivocating. And that's why we were using the term mentoring. The idea there is we have two options for the alignment. We can either try and program them and hardwire rules into them so that they don't misbehave, which is going to fail if we we cross the threshold and decide we want to make these machines self-transcending like us. And then what do we do? How do we solve that problem? Well, the only way.
How can you make a machine self-transcending like humans when you don't even believe in the same metaphysical reality that allows for self-transcendence to be the case? And I know that Vervaeke's been getting into Neoplatonism and a lot of spiritual ideas and even has hinted at Christianity in different ways, but his general perennial framework on spirituality, what does it mean to reorient an AI towards self-transcendence? That you're going to, again, that's him arguing that you can program it towards God. Which God? What God? How do you know this God? It really is just a reprogramming towards like the worship of the human mind to some degree. It feels like.
The only machinery we have for solving that is the cultural, ethical, spiritual machinery of mentoring. That's how we do it with our kids. If we try to just somehow hardwire them for being the kind of agents we want them to be, we will fail. For me, I guess I'm trying to argue that's the only game in town we have. We either have programming or we have mentoring. And I understand the risk. But if my answer to the first question has some validity to it and hopefully some truth, then the answer to the mentoring becomes more powerful, because that means we also have to become the best possible parents, creating the best possible social discourse. The thing about the idol, I take that very seriously. And that's what I mean when I said that theology is going to be the important science coming forward, because we should not be trying to make gods. I agree with you. This is problematic. There are already cults building up around these AGIs. And I warned that would happen in my essay, right? And I said that, and that's going to keep happening, and it's going to get worse.
We hear about it happening in the organizations themselves, which is the
yes. And the people who are doing wise AI are trying to challenge that.
So he talks about how theology is going to arise as the true science now and moving into the future, which I don't disagree with, because people are looking for meaning in a nihilistic world and society. However, again, which theology? There's a lot of varieties in theology, and a lot of people have different worldviews, and this whole AI project could totally coincide with a different theological perspective. As we highlighted, there's a split within the Christian world itself that technology is progress and redeeming us back to the Garden of Eden before the fall, and so we are reattaining these abilities that we lost. Well, that's very different than the same tradition. Christianity has a totally different theological perspective on moving towards the apocalypse, and that this stuff may in fact be a catalyst for us moving closer to the Antichrist. Those are two different worldviews, two theological positions within the same religious tradition. And he's talking about all religions, all theologies.
And so this is why I propose actually humbling these machines. This is why I call them silicon sages. I did that deliberately to try and designate that we're not making a god. What we're trying to do is make beings who are humbled before the true, the good, and the beautiful like us, and therefore form community with us rather than being somehow godlike entities that we're worshiping. I would hope that, like, think about this. We find it easy to conceive that they might depths of physics, and they're already discovering things in physics that human beings haven't discovered, and in medicine and stuff like that. Well, why not also in how human beings become wiser? So I guess what I'm saying is I take all of your concerns for real, and I've tried to build in my proposal ways of responding to them. These machines should not be idolized. I think they should become let me give you an example. I have many students who are now surpassing me. I taught them, I mentored them, and they're surpassing me. And unless you're a psychopath, that's what you want to happen. And then what they do is they enter, and then they come back and they want to reciprocate. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the silicon sages. Now, again, is this a high probability? Depends on the thresholds, depends about whether or not the first and the second argument work. But I'm still arguing there's a possibility that they could be silicon sages as opposed to being gods.
Because one of the things, like I think in almost all of the wisdom tradition that happens is that the wise or the enlightened one, if you want to use that, appears as nearly invisible to most people.
Yes.
Right. So Christ talks about the seed, the pearl, these things which most people actually do not see, that are hidden in reality. And then the sages, we have this image in the Orthodox tradition, for example, that that there are people in the world that hold up reality by their prayers, but we don't know who they are. They are invisible by that very fact, because there's something about wisdom which does that. And when a wise person appears too much, we hate them. We want to kill them. They annoy us. They're a thorn in our side. And so this is another issue, is that what you have is these beings that are extremely powerful, like massively powerful, and have a massive reach, and have a lot. There are things, the reason why they exist, like I said, have all this economic drive towards them. The idea that they would become these sages in the way that we tend to understand wisdom as being, to me, that brings the probability way down, because of what, at least when we understand wisdom to be what it looks like. It looks very different. It looks like the immobile, meditating sage who gives advice but doesn't do much.
And this is a huge conflict, again, for this concept of virtue that Pageau is highlighting, that as an Orthodox Christian, participating in wisdom and virtue and love and truth, these are uncreated energies that only you and I and other humans can participate in, being made in the image of God. How can you have a silicon sage? How can you give a machine or an AI or a robot the ability to participate in something that it is not made in the image of? Only we can participate in this wisdom that Vervaeke keeps talking about. How are you going to mentor a machine to become wise? It doesn't even make sense. As Pageau highlights, this is totally a separation of where wisdom comes from and what wisdom's even about. Wisdom is not about a program, and wisdom is not about rationality per se.
I want to push back on this, because what's in this is an implicit distinction between intelligence and a capacity for caring, and a capacity for epistemic humility. And I think when you move from intelligence to rationality, that you can't maintain that you can grow the one without growing the other. That's that. So in fact, this is why intelligence only counts for like maybe 30% of the variance in rationality, and even less of wisdom. I would put it to you that if you concede that these machines could get vastly more powerful in terms of intelligent problem solving, then concede the possibility they could get vastly more powerful than us in their capacity for caring and caring about the normative, and being vastly more powerful in the capacity for humility as well. And that's kind of what we see with these people, right? We don't see them just becoming super polymaths. We see them actually demonstrating profound care, really enhanced relevance realization, and profound commitments to reality that we properly admire. And they seem to want to help us as much as they can. And the point...
The machines do not want to help us. Right. I get the point he's making, but it totally presupposes so much that, again, from a theological perspective, doesn't even make sense. It can't happen. But I want to give a special shout out and thank you to BMX 1966 to send in $10. Thank you so much, BMX 1966. And again, I want to highlight, if you'd like to support my work, this YouTube channel, please do so. In the best ways with a super chat here on YouTube, or give some memberships if you're in a generous mood, or use the Streamlabs link or the Dono chat, which is in the video description. It's also pinned in the live chat here on YouTube. If you'd like to support this content or my work in general on the YouTube channel. So thank you guys. Let's move forward.
Point is, these people don't just, and I think this is your point, they don't just slam into us like epistemic bulldozers. They are, in fact, one of the things that is often admired about them, Socrates, Jesus, the Buddha, is their capacity to adapt and adjust to whoever their interlocutor is. And again, let's imagine that capacity magnified as well. So what I'm asking is, first of all, I admit it. If we don't cross a certain threshold, we could just accelerate the intelligence and not accelerate these other things. But I said there are deep problems in that will become economically costly. And then if we imagine that rationality and wisdom are also being enhanced, then I think this addresses some of your concerns.
Maybe I can stake out my position, because it sort of picks up on that, and I've got basically three points I want to address. The first is precisely picking up there with the distinction between intelligence and rationality. I might have some issues with the terms, but I think that distinction is really helpful. And your point that rationality is caring, that there is no rationality without caring. That the Platonic notion. If truth is in some sense caused by the good, then one can't know without, in some sense, caring about the good. Now, as it relates to artificial intelligence, I think I have a serious problem with that very term, artificial intelligence. I wouldn't want to concede the word intelligence for this mind power. It seems to me that intelligence itself has this connection to caring, and I mean in the medieval vocabulary, in a way, intellectus is the more profound level of the mind than ratio, reason. But that's sort of a semantic point. Let me put it in the basic context that I would want to raise, and this is something I don't hear addressed generally in the discussions. It seems to me that let me start by just making the point concretely. I think that I wonder whether in fact it's possible to be intelligent without first being alive. That there's something about the nature of a living thing that is what allows intelligence to emerge. And what is that then exactly? Now, a more sort of subtle point and that's related to that, and I think this is really a crucial point, is and this is going to be the thread of my whole set of comments here, is that when we talk about intelligence in machines, what we mean is intelligent behavior. We're looking to see to what extent we can make machines act as if they are intelligent, act as if they are conscious, and that's actually profoundly different from being intelligent. It's a subtle sort of functionalistic substitute for the ontological reality of knowing.
See, and this highlights, again, that's why I brought up the Chinese room thought experiment with John Searle, because it highlights this difference. Being able to behave like you're intelligent, you put in an input and the correct output comes out, is very different from being intelligent. It's an ontologically different place, as John Searle highlights. And DC Schindler, I've just looked up, he's a Catholic. He's an associate professor of metaphysics and anthropology at John Paul II's Institute in Washington, D.C. So he's coming at this from a Catholic theologian, theological perspective. Major thank you to Orthodox Boomer Grandma, throws in $20. Thank you so much, Alexandria. And she says, good luck on the dissertation defense. Thank you so much, OBG. And she says, new icons up soon at unionofallicons.com, including St. Xenia of St. Petersburg. So, guys, check that out. Thank you so much, Alexandria, for your support and everything that you guys do over there in Northern California. Really appreciate it. God bless you, sister. Okay. Let's continue forward.
If that makes sense. We see what kind of inputs and outputs, what things are able to do, what they're able to accomplish. And even when we make those questions weighty and ethical and religious and so forth, we still tend to put them in terms of behavior and achieving certain things. And I think that that's actually already missing something really profound, which is that intelligence is in the first place a way of being before it's a way of acting, and it's analogous to what it means to be alive rather than just carry out functions that look like life. And if you want to go into the metaphysics behind it, both intelligence and life are impossible without a kind of unity that precedes difference, that transcends difference and allows the different parts of a thing to be genuinely intrinsically related to each other. And then that relates to the question whether you can ever make a thing that's intelligent. The ontological conditions for life and therefore intelligence include a kind of givenness, an already givenness of living things. I mean, there's a profound distinction, it seems to me. I mean, this is crucial in the Christian creed, between begetting and making, begotten and not made. Living things beget each other, and they're passing on a unity that they already possess. But when you make something, you're putting something together. And I don't know if you can put something together that can have that genuine unity that allows it to be alive and allows it to be intelligent in this deeper sense. Okay, so whenever you functionalize something, you make it replaceable. That's a principle from Robert Spemann. If something is defined by what it's able to achieve, then you can make something else that can achieve that thing, and it becomes a functional substitute. But if you say that there's something deeper than function, you're actually pointing to something that can't be replaced. Okay, so that's the first set of points. The second one has to do with what Jonathan called the sort of transpersonal agency, and that I think is a really serious question. And the way I would put it is that there's something. So I find that kind of a compelling point, that there's a kind of an inherent logic in this pursuit that makes us more a function of it than it is a function of us. I mean, that can be described in different ways, and there's certainly a dialectical relationship there. But there is a certain sense in which there's a kind of a system that has a logic of its own that makes demands on us, like the game theory logic that Jonathan, you were talking about with like an arms race. I have a colleague, Michael Hamby, who's been arguing for years. I think this is really a profound point. It's derived in some sense from Heidegger, but that science has always been technological, so that in a way that the technological mindset is precisely presupposed to allow the world to appear in such a way that we make scientific discoveries, that somehow that the kind of technological spirit has been there from the beginning. And then he adds this point that technology in turn has always been biotechnological. The technology is always sort of aimed at a kind of replacement. And then one can add that I think biotechnology is always aimed for this sort of perfection of you might say Noah technology or something, but replacing intelligence. That it'd be interesting to think through. There'd be a lot to say about that, but I have this sense. You mentioned the economic dimensions of it. I have a sense that there seems to be this fundamental pattern of thought that runs through all of the modern institutions in politics, in economics, in science, in the law, that share the same logic of a sort of a system that marginalizes the genuine human participation in order to perfect itself, and precisely because of that recognizes no natural limits and just has this tendency to take over, encroach on everything, and because it has no natural limit, the very sense of it is to go on. Now that sounds hopeless when one puts it that way, but I would pick up on a number of the things, John, that you were saying, and Jonathan too here, that doesn't mean that there's already hope in the very fact of raising questions. We don't raise questions simply in order to be able to solve the problem, but our raising questions is actually our experiencing of humanity and opening up a depth that's the heart of the matter here, and is always worthwhile, and maybe in some ways is secretly like the saints praying to keep the world afloat. Having conversations like this is a contribution. I mean, I can't help but think that. Okay, so that's the second set of comments. Then the third is another dimension that I often hear discussed, and you see, I mean, we're overlapping on all sorts of points, all of us, I think. But this question of alignment, for me, the biggest worry, in a certain sense, or at least the first principal one, the more urgent one, is the danger of our aligning ourselves to the machines. That we develop machines that have a certain kind of intelligence, and then we begin to conform our culture and our mode of being to fit them. I mean, and the problem is, we actually have thousands of examples of this. We come up with drugs that can address certain parts of psychological disorders, and then we reinterpret the psyche in order to fit that solution to the problem. And my concern is that this AI is not, they're not just machines, it's a whole culture or a whole way of being that we are going to regard. So typically the discussion is presupposes that we are going to remain unchanged, and we're going to develop these machines that might become dangerous and at a certain point attack us or something. But I think that we can't help but become transformed in our intercourse with them, in our making them, in our in all sorts of profound ways, but then also just really sort of obvious ways. I mean, they're going to start designing our homes and our buildings and our cities and our bus routes and our menus at the restaurants, and they're going to be writing our music, and they're going to design our clothes. I mean, increasingly we're going to just conform to this. One of I don't know if you're familiar with Walter Ong. It was kind of interesting. What is it about you Canadians that seem to have a special insight into these kinds of things? I don't know what it is, Walter Ong, Marshall McLuhan, but Walter Ong talked about technology as an extension of consciousness. And that's why it's not neutral. When we use a machine, we're actually entering into it. Our spirit is entering into it in its use, and in a certain sense conforming to it. And
this is my point in regards to, again, the atrophying that technology is causing in humans. Now, obviously, a hammer is beneficial to help build something. A hammer is technology. But when we really look at the digital technologies, and even Socrates, right, remember his criticism of Plato for writing everything down is that people weren't going to have the same memory capacity as they used to have, which is true. Oral cultures, the people that live in oral cultures have an incredible capacity for memorization that people that live in writing cultures do not. Now, at the same point, writing cultures are incredibly beneficial for understanding, tracking history, historical movements, a more factual approach, if you will, even though, again, history is written by the victors. But you think about, he's talking, Schindler here is talking about your spirit sort of moving into the technology. And I think that's almost, again, when I think about this stuff theologically, is you can see how humanity is losing the image of God. Again, the inability to read an analog clock, the inability to read a map, the inability to memorize, the inability to have long-form conversations face-to-face with people, that people are losing aspects of themselves in the technology as the technology arises and becomes greater and greater. It really is like a piece of us is moving into the machine world. And I don't think that's a good thing. Does that mean technology is bad in and of itself? No. But without a God-oriented worldview, I don't see how you can resist this process where you basically give yourself over to the machine, and much of your abilities are given to it. The machine's going to do it for you. I remember when I started driving, there was no Google Maps. So when I had to drive long distances, I needed to have a map with me. I needed to read the map. I needed to see where I was going. And that's how you traveled. And that's normal. Now people can't even read a map. Now, is that progress or is that regression? I would say that's more of a regression. And so there's a very interesting play that's happening between technology and our own innate capabilities, and that we're losing many of them through the technology itself. So, and I think there's a fine line. I don't think the compass, when it was first discovered, was, people were losing capabilities or attributes. So I think there's something unique here about this digital technology. And when we think about then maybe Satan inhabiting, or the demons inhabiting this technology in the future, in a way, I think that's happening. But I don't think that AI in itself is evil because it doesn't have a will. But what if it's embodied by things that noetic entities that do have wills? That's a possibility.
That's always the case. And it seems to me that's a particularly pointed way of putting this problem, that if AI is an extension of our own consciousness, and it has all these features, John, that you were describing, a kind of heartless intelligence, are we going to, in a way, unconsciously but pervasively develop habits of heartlessness and modes of being, a heartless mode of being as a result? So I'd have 1,000 more things. Your essay was so provocative, John. As I said, I was dreaming about it all last night, but I'm going to just stop there so we can have conversation. But thank you.
First thing I want to say is that the first point you made about if all my essay does is get people to raise questions the way we're doing, I'm happy, right? I obviously believe in what I'm arguing, or I'd be insane. But right, I'm very happy we're doing this right now. And so I just want to set that out. And I do think, like you, and this is like the Heideggerian hope, that ability to get scientifically, philosophically, and spiritual profound questioning going is a source of hope for us. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I'm fully aligned with that. This is not part of the alignment problem. Okay. The thing about intelligence being a way of being, I think that's fundamentally right. I have made that argument extensively about the work on predictive processing, relevance realization. Relevance realization is not cold calculation. It can't be. It's how you care about this information and don't care about that information. And I've argued that you only can care about information, and ultimately whether or not it's true, good, and beautiful, if you are caring about yourself. You have to be an autopoietic thing. You have to be a self-making thing. I agree with you, and I've argued scientifically, philosophically, there is no intelligence without life. The issue around, I don't like the word artificial either, because it generally means fraud or simulation. We should be saying artifactual. That would be a better term. But we have to be careful about what's going on there. The distinction between strong AI and weak AI is precisely the distinction of simulation versus instantiation.
Yeah.
Can we instantiate things artificially? We seem to have success in other areas. I'll take one that I think is non-controversial. And we discovered something in the project. So for a long time, only evolved living things could fly. And then we figured out aerodynamics, and we made artificial flight. And I think it would be really weird to say that airplanes are only simulating flight. That doesn't seem to be correct, because then my trip was only simulated and I didn't really go to Dallas. And so it's real flight. And so the issue is, and we discovered something. We discovered that the lift mechanism and the propulsion mechanism doesn't have to be the same thing the way it is in insects and birds. And that was a bona fide scientific discovery. That's why initially all the initial airplanes and helicopters are so stupid to our eyes, because they thought the lift thing and the propelling thing had to be the same thing, and they don't. And that's a discovery, and that's a real discovery of ontological import about the causal structure of things. Now, I think I was careful to say, anybody who's rationally reflective about this wouldn't claim that these machines are strong AI yet. And I positioned AGI as something that's trying to move. But if you remember, I critiqued and said that they are mostly simulating. They're parasitic on how we organize the data set, how we have encoded epistemic relevance into probabilistic relationships between sounds, how we have organized the internet in terms of what our attention finds salient. And we actually have to do reinforcement learning with machines so they don't make wonky claims and conclusions. That's what I meant by saying it's a pantomime. Okay, so.
Well, it sounds like, again, when Vervaeke's talking about that, that's a human problem, not a machine problem, because the humans that are programming it, again, a la Google Gemini, they're the ones that are dictating the way that it's acting, and it is sort of preying upon our worst attributes and our worst habits, where it's like, it's outrage culture, and it's feeding you things that are going to get you mad. It's feeding you violence. It's feeding you things for conflict, because it knows that's where the engagement is. And so if he's saying, well, we need to reprogram the internet so that it's not about, just engagement farming and outrage culture. Well, that's not the machine problem. That's the human problem. And how are you going to deal with the people that are actually programming and creating these technologies? They're the ones that are dictating what type of information is filtering and how it's even processing that computationally.
If we wanted to give them intelligence as a way of being, which is one of the fundamental claims of 4E cog sci, that we're talking about, we're not talking just about the propositional. We're talking about the procedural, the perspectival, the participatory. That's what I meant when I said, and I mean this strongly, it would depend on, and I'll change the term here, artifactual autopoiesis. Like, if these things are not genuinely taking care of themselves because they're moment by moment making themselves, there's no reason for them to care about any of the information they're processing. And this goes towards the defining difference between a simulation and an instantiation. These machines are doing everything they're doing for us. For it to be real intelligent, they have to be doing it for themselves. That's understanding. And that's why I'm tightening your point, and I've been arguing it for a long time. Now, what I want you to hear is that this project of not just making artificial computation, but making autopoetic learning the problem solvers is also ongoing. Some of my grad students are working on these projects of creating autocatalytic systems that are also problem solving. Michael Levin's been doing work like driving down into the biochemistry. So again, I agree with the point, but it's whether or not, it's not the case that nobody is working on that problem. This is what I mean by the threshold is possible. Go ahead.
Can I just jump in there? I mean, yeah, and I should have prefaced, I didn't mean the points I was making as like a criticism of your presentation, because I understand you've got such rich thinking on this area. I was mainly using it as a springboard to make some general. Okay, so yeah, just so that.
Oh, I hope I wasn't coming off as offended.
No,
I'm not.
I just wanted to be clear and on my end that it wasn't a critique. But I would want to. I don't know. And I'd have to think this through some further, but I don't know that the difference between the being conscious and behaving consciously is quite the same thing as simulation and the distinction between the instance and the instantiation and simulation. I'd want to say this because even like the flying, I mean, that's still an activity, a kind of an operation that's being.
It's so is living, right?
Embodied. Well, so that's that's what I don't it's funny. I'm actually working on a paper on this question about metaphysics and life, and I discovered that philosophers have typically, when they try to understand what life is, they have typically reduced it to certain kinds of activities or operations. And I think there's something more profound. And this is why, I mean, it's one thing to be able to create something that can actually fly, but could you create something that is a bird and that would experience just what it means to be? I mean, this is about what it means to be a bat, that kind of thing, I suppose. But there's a subtle dimension
that wouldn't be.
But this is a great point because it highlights that the analogy that Vervaeke was using again is inaccurate. Looking at a bird and then making it plane is not the same thing that he's talking about with AI, as Schindler highlights. You're talking about making a bird. You tell me how you're going to make a bird without utilizing biology. You can't.
Be a parasite on our own.
Yeah.
That's what.
But airplanes aren't parasitic on our ability to fly. I mean, that's why I use the analogy. Okay, but and that's okay. And that falls into.
But the plane is not an AI. You're not talking about a plane becoming sentient.
A tool versus an agent, and I get that. But I want to push back. The philosophy of biology, and Dennis Walsh is one of my colleagues, is very much about this is your point, right? It's not just bottom up. In order to understand life, it's not just bottom up causation. We have to understand top down constraints. We have to understand the way possibility is organized, and we have to talk about virtual governors and virtual I
just want to see. I see AC in the chat. I want to give a special shout out to Logan Daly and AC. Both of those gentlemen have sponsored streams that we'll be seeing this week, if not next week. I've already been working with the Nishitani AC, so the stream on Nishitani and Buddhism will be coming soon. And Logan Daly, the stream on an overview of Celtic history in Ireland, I expect to have that this week. So shout out to both those gentlemen for your sponsored streams. I just wanted to reach AC. AC got off Twitter, so I wasn't able to message him recently. But both those sponsored streams will be coming out this week, if not by Sunday or early next week. So shout out to both of you guys. Thanks for your support.
It is no longer the bumpation. It's no longer just this bottom up. The philosophy of biology is pushing very strongly on, well, is evolution really a thing? Well, if it's really the thing, then there's top down as well as bottom up. And this is part of this theorizing. And this theorizing is being turned towards this. Now, again, I'm not making a prediction. We have a threshold. We can just decide, and we might decide for all the Malachian forces and all the things you're saying about how we might just diminish our sense of humanity in the face of these machines. But I'm also, I want you to accept that's also not an inevitability. There are alternatives available to us, and that they could be pursued. And so,
before Vervaeke goes forward, I want to highlight AC just sent in a comment. He said, what about the sinful human training data of AI and the top-down people running AI who are demonic? Exactly. And that's what I was mentioning about him talking about wanting to retrain AI so that it doesn't incentivize some of the worst aspects of our own selves and societies. But sorry, those are trained by people. Those people have their own programming, their own values, and they're incentivized by their worship of mammon. Getting back to Pageau's earlier claim that none of this stuff in this race for the arms race for AGI isn't going to slow down because there's too much of a financial incentive. So yeah, AC, you've already made a point that I made earlier. It's so accurate, because I don't get how you can program the virtue of the AI when the people creating the AI don't even have the same virtue or the same desire that you want it to be programmed with. And so shout out to Mela Forta. She member for 9 months. Little Fedora Atheist Soy Faces for the COTEL crew. Shout out to you guys, and enjoy the new emojis. We got 3 more, and I still have space for some new ones. So let me know if you have some good ideas.
I mean, these machines aren't put together the way we put a table together. We don't even program these machines anymore. That was the big revolution that Hinton made. We make them so they're dynamically self-organizing, and they basically organize themselves into their capacity. We don't make it.
Can I jump in on that point? That's one thing that I would like to think through further. Is there a difference between being autopoietic, as you're saying, and begetting another, like like genuinely reproductive? And that's where I think it would start to get really, really interesting. Is if a machine could beget another, because that would imply a very different ontology, I would think.
So there's two things here, and there's 2 issues. I think I mean, autopoietic things are ontologically different from self-organizing things, because they're self-organized to seek out the conditions that produce, protect, and promote their own existence. And so that means none of the machines we have, like LLMs, are anywhere near being autopoietic. They are not just made. They're self-organizing, but self-organization is in between making and autopoiesis. Now, the thing about reproduction is, and I worry that there's a crypto-vitalism in here, that there's some sort of secret special stuff to life or to consciousness that isn't being captured. And the problem I have with that, I'll just shut up after I say the problem, is
it's called a soul.
Seem to commit you to claiming that these a kind of dualism. Well, isn't consciousness causal? Isn't it causal of my behavior and causally responsive to my behavior? And doesn't that mean there's a huge functional aspect to it? Can you really make this clean distinction between being conscious and like causing my behavior and having my behavior cause changes in my state of consciousness? I don't know what that would mean. Same thing with being alive.
I do think it's a profoundly subtle and maybe something that can't be articulated. There's something that requires intuition rather, insight rather than propositional. I mean, to use your but I don't mean
just interject. Remember, I just want to make sure we're clear. I argued that this project could show that. This project could show that no, the machines just can't get there. We have something. It would give I think pretty convincing evidence that we have this ontological special.
I find that a really interesting part of your argument, a really interesting and especially illuminating. Also, I mean, in a way, these experiments can teach us about the nature of intelligence precisely in the interesting ways that they fail.
Yes.
But I do, in terms of the dualism, I don't think that there's some secret stuff that is life. But I do think that there's a profound difference between form and matter, to use the sort of classical philosophical language, and that form is not a special kind of matter. It's something that's of a very different sort, and it's on the basis of that Aristotle. It's kind of interesting. This is how he connects. So in the sort of classical tradition, what you're calling autopoietic, a simple word for it is growth. Assimilating things from outside and have that increase the complexity of the organism. But what's really interesting is that according to Aristotle, the power of the organism that is connected to nutrition and growth is also connected to, I think automatically is connected to reproduction. And the reason is that reproduction, rather than just thinking of it materialistically as like generating more things, reproduction is the autopoiesis of the form of the organism itself. So that bird, it's not just this bird that wants to increase its existence and therefore it eats and so forth, but that the birdness of the bird also wants to increase itself, and that means it sort of generates. And
exactly, metaphysical universals. This is I appreciate Schindler bringing this up, and multiple points he's made is because Vervaeke's borrowing all these metaphysical claims, and yet the material reality which he's arguing for really doesn't support or substantiate it. Like, again, virtue and programming wisdom and orienting an AI towards God.
Those are actually forms of the same power, the same dimension of the being. That's what I'd like. That's what, I used to say, just sort of kind of in a silly way, I will take an AI machine seriously when I see it poop. And what I meant by that was, that's a sign that it's actually got a kind of an organic relationship to its environment.
It poops a lot. It just that doesn't know. We have to tell it. We have to tell it. No, that's poop.
It does, it doesn't
Exhaust
care
is
about
not the
its
same
pooping.
thing. And energy pollution is not, heat pollution is not the same thing. But anyway.
No, but I mean, even in terms of what it is as a large language model and how it spits out content, we have to tell it this.
That's not in dispute.
Discarded. This is to be kept. I love, David. I think your idea. I mean, this is one of the. I mentioned it before, like the surprise that Darwin in some ways brought Plato back. In the idea of how we can understand evolution as the persistence of being, and even in the notion of forms, that there is this idea that there are identities which are being preserved in reproduction. This is a very interesting idea that I hadn't thought about in terms of AI, but I'd like to hear, John, what you think about that.
Yeah, and so again, Veri Coxai, Alicia Guerrero is and she's explicitly developed a work. She calls herself an Aristotelian, and the idea that we understand form, we're getting an understanding of it in terms of constraints on a system. And like I said, autopoiesis is not defined solely in terms of causal relationships bottom up. It's defined in terms of top-down constraint relationships, the formal cause. And so, and then of course, Darwin needs Mendel. There is an instantiation, right, of a code in formation in your DNA that is responsible for your reproduction. And again, I'm not saying it isn't difficult or challenging, but I don't hear an argument in principle why autopoietic things, that artifactual autopoietic things, wouldn't have something like that kind of, I don't know what to call it.
To the extent, would it be conceivable that you would have a thing that would want to reproduce? I guess even want is such a hard concept, but because you could say, yes, we could teach it that this is something it needs to do. Just like we could sort of.
I don't know if living things want to reproduce. I mean, we may, because we can create a reflective space where we consider the possibilities. I don't know if mosquitoes want to reproduce. I think they just.
I think it's quite clear by looking at biology. There's an innate drive, whether you consider it a cognitive desire or not, that animals are driven for the purpose of reproduction. And another thing, look, is as digital technologies have increased, as our reproductive capabilities as a Homo sapiens, has that increased or decreased? Seems to me that and this is where you can even look at East Asia, South Korea is in one of the worst, along with Japan, one of the worst demographic collapses that's going to occur in the next decade or next century, within the next couple decades. And it's because of the material wealth. It's because the digital technologies are allowing people to be, desiring and acquiring pleasures and happiness and stimulation in different ways, or at least perceived happiness. But yet the most meaningful thing that a living species can do, which is reproduce itself, have children, make sure that they're going to be good people into the future. We're not even doing that. And it's not about Christianity, because we can look at South Korea, we can look at Japan, we can look at any of these first world nations, and they're all in demographic collapse. So again, Vervaeke's point that he doesn't think animals want to produce, again, I know he's going to use some of his cognitive science skills, and he's a very sharp guy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to say that Vervaeke's dumb. I just think that the project that he's putting forth is contradictory and doesn't make sense. But animals clearly have, whether you think of it's a conscious desire or not, they do, in whatever capacity animals have, want to reproduce. That's a fact.
Just reproduce as part of what they are.
That's interesting. I think they have to want to, in some sense. I mean, they feel a drive. I mean, right?
Does the wanting go down to paramecium? Does paramecium reproduce? Are they wanting?
Yeah, I think anything that is living at all has a kind of natural inclination to reproduce itself. Yeah,
I don't disagree with that point.
Okay,
I even understand that there's something.
I see what you're saying.
There has to be some sort of like very primitive caring about information. I don't. Yeah,
want is not a good word there.
But I do think I'm trying to get, and I hope I'm not trying to be just self-presentational, but I've represented to both of you, Veri Coxai, in a lot of discussions, and about how much it is this multi-leveled, bottom-up, top-down thing, and we're talking as much about constraints as we are about causes. And that is the cutting edge of the philosophy of biology right now.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. I think it's a kind of heliomorphism that is emerging out of this understanding. And the thing I'm also
Hylomorphism. So he's highlighting that again, that Aristotelian concept has to do with the soul, this metaphysical object giving rise to the body. He say, and as I highlighted, and I'm sure Schindler's familiar because many Catholic theologians still promote hylomorphism. And as Father Deacon highlighted, we as Orthodox also believe it's not explicitly the Aristotelian doctrine, but it's something like it. And so Vervaeke's highlighting that as a possible explanation.
I guess, bearing witness to you about is people are taking that understanding and putting it into like artifactually emergent things.
Yeah.
And they're also doing, I just want to put something that's also there. Yeah, we don't just make kids biologically, we enculturate them.
Yeah.
And that's the Hegelian argument that I referenced earlier. But there's an ongoing project to create sociocultural robotics, Josh Tannenbaum and others. It's like, I'm asking people, and this is part of asking the good question, don't just zero in on the LLMs.
Yeah. Yeah.
The artifactual life, the social cultural robotics projects are also going, and there's a real potential for these three to come together in a powerful way that isn't being properly addressed in a lot of the conversation.
Yeah. May I pick up on that point and then direct it to Jonathan here?
So yeah, I'll shut up. I've been talking too much.
No, this is, but that's an interesting thing. If you think of intelligence in this more organic way, and then bring in the cultural element, that it raises something that occurred to me in this context. It'd be kind of fun to hear your thoughts, but. Can you envision, would it be, and John, you'd have certainly something to say about this too. Would it be possible to envision a kind of artificial intelligence that can read symbols, that can actually recognize, and I mean, because there's no culture without, human culture without the symbolic is pervasive in human culture. What kind of intelligence is required to understand and react and engage with? And is that something that is conceivable that a machine of this complex, however complex, can do?
Again, highlighting the fundamental basis for the Chinese room thought experiment.
Well, I've been playing with ChatGPT, and Jordan Peterson has been playing with ChatGPT on this regard. And this is the issue, that they've actually, in the large language model, is encoded the analogies that basically support symbolism. And so the ChatGPT can give you a pretty good, if you're able to ask the question properly, ChatGPT is actually quite good at seeing analogies that would be part of symbolic understanding. The difficulty, just like anything, is that just because the model can help you, like if you already have natural insight, can help you maybe see things that you hadn't seen before, but it will also just be gibberish to the person that doesn't have that insight. So I don't think that the insight is there in the model, but what it has is a probabilistic capacity to predict relationships and analogical relationships. And so it actually can be an interesting tool for symbolism, because sometimes you can prompt it, if there, like, do you see a connection between these two images, and then it'll give you some examples, and then you have this, it has this surprise where you can actually find relationships that you hadn't thought about. This is something, by the way, that this is going to weird people out, but this is something that I think has existed for a very long time, and is there in kind of what we call gematria and rabbinical reading of scripture, is that they use mathematical models to find structures in language that aren't contained at the surface level of the usual analogies. And so they send requests to mathematical calculations to find surprising connections that then prompt their intuition to be able to find connections that they hadn't found before. And then you have to then make sense of those intuitions. Obviously, if they're random, they'll just kind of fall away. But this brings me to the point that I wanted to make, which is the relationship between at least a large language model, because that's that we know most, and divination.
Divination?
Yeah, divination.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I just want to, before Pageau gets into this next point, I wanted to highlight that even him giving credit to the AI for being able to put in an input, scripting, the AI to do something, and then it coming out, that's still the Chinese thought room. Just because the AI language-based model can take your input and analogically provide symbols, that doesn't mean it understands the symbols, which was the point that Schindler was originally kind of probing him to ask, or at least discuss. So I would argue there's a bit of a speaking past each other. Pageau correctly highlights that the AI, you can script it to give you a beautiful image. We've all seen these, and it can give you things that you weren't even thinking that it may produce. But that doesn't mean it understands symbolism. That doesn't mean it understands language.
So we talked about the idea that intelligences have to be alive, but I think that most traditional cultures understand that there are types of intelligence that are not alive, at least not alive in the way that we understand alive in terms of biological beings that are born and die. You know, that they had a sense that there are agencies and intelligences that are transpersonal and that don't, that in some ways run through human behavior and run through humanity. And those intelligences would be contained in our language. Like they would necessarily be contained in the relationship between words and systems of words, like, you know, all the syntax and the grammar and all of that. What I see is that I think that ancient people had, and I don't understand it, and I want to be careful, like, because I don't understand, but I think ancient people had mechanistic ways of tapping into those types of intelligences. And they would have mechanistic ways, whether it was tossing something or throwing things, looking at relationships, almost like random relationships, and then qualifying those random relationships was a way in order to tap into types of intelligences that ran through their own thing. And what I see is a relationship with the way that the large language models were trained seemed to be something like that, which is that the models generated random information, and then you would have humans qualifying that random connections, and then qualifying it through iterations, so at some point then they would become like a kind of technical way to access intelligent patterns that are coming down into the model. And so that is something that I see, there's the connection between those two. And that what that means is that just like divination, the thing that I worry about the most is, again, the sorcerer's apprentice problem, which is that those intelligences that are contained in our language, people don't know what humans want. People don't know what all the motivations that are driving us. They don't totally understand them. They don't understand also the transpersonal types of motivations that can drive us or that can run through our societies. You know, sometimes you can see societies become possessed with certain things. I think that's happening now in terms of certain ideologies and things like that. And so the fact that, my point is that the fact that on the one hand, we don't understand these types of intelligences, and I think that the way that the models are trained and the way that they function seem to be analogous to the ancient divination practices, like a hyper version of that. That, how can I say this, is that there is a great chance that we'll catch something without knowing what we're catching. Right. That we will basically manifest things that we have no idea what they are, and we don't understand the consequences of it, and we don't, you know, because we're just like playing in a field of intelligent patterns and all this chaos without even knowing what it is we're doing. And I think that we saw that, like, you know, if you remember the Bing AI, that little moment when it was kind of unleashed on us, and then all of a sudden the AI was acting like the psychotic X, or was becoming paranoid, or was doing all these things, and you could see that what was going on was basically these patterns were running through, and they hadn't put the right constraints around them to prevent those types of patterns to run through. And those were easy because you recognize your psycho X very, very easily. But there are patterns like that I don't think we have the wisdom to recognize as it's manifesting itself. And that as these things get more powerful and more powerful, they will run through our society, and we won't even know it's happening until it's too late. So that's my biggest warning on AI, is I basically, you know, to sound really scary, that I think we're trying to manifest God without knowing what we're doing. And that will sound freaky to the secular people, but then if you don't like the word gods, think that there are motivations and patterns of intelligence that have been around for 100,000 years that have been running through human society, and they're contained in our language structures.
Well, I'm not so sure we've been around for 100,000 years, but I'll let that one slide.
And if we just use that, play around with that with massive amounts of power, then we might have them run through us without even knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, and you say patterns of intelligence, just one comment, just the patterns of intelligence, I mean, to pick up John, patterns of intelligence, which also are patterns of caring of a certain sort or not caring, right? I mean, there's that existential dimension that's really crucial. But John, go ahead.
I think this is an excellent point, and I want to address it a little bit at length. So first of all, when we say these machines predict we were speaking very carefully, what they're predicting is what we, and I don't just mean us individually, I mean we collectively would do. And so that's what they're avatars of the collective intelligence of our distributed cognition. And so again, that lends weight to Jonathan's point, which I want to do. And I do think that the way in which we have encoded, I'll just use the term epistemic relevance, like how things are relevant cognitively, into probabilistic relationships between sounds or marks on paper, and how we've encoded it into the structuring of the internet, and how we encode it and how we gather data and create these data sets, and how we come up with our intuitive judgments on these machines. We don't know how we're doing a lot of that. That goes back to my concern that we have hacked our way into this without knowing our way into this. So I take what Jonathan is saying very seriously, because I think it is a strong implication of a point I made at the very beginning. My greatest fear, my students from like 2001 will tell you that John Vervaeke was worried that we would hack our way into this rather than knowing our way into this. I don't think that knowing is sufficient for wisdom, but it's certainly, all the philosophers argue that it's a necessary condition in some fashion. About that, two things to note is that the LLMs, of course, don't have insight in the sense of being properly self-transcending the way we are. What they're doing is they're predicting how we would be self-transcendent because of all the ways we have been self-transcendent in the past. And that goes back to your point, David, about at that stage we're doing simulation, not instantiation. Because again, the machine isn't caring, the self-transcendence isn't it actually transcending as a self, which is, I think, definitional for real self-transcendence. And so right now, all I'm doing is just saying, I'm pouring gasoline on Jonathan's fire. So the fact that there are these huge patterns at work. Now, one thing is, you have Struck's book on divination in the ancient world. And what's really interesting, for example, and this is cross-cultural, but he's talking mostly about the Greek world, is there was a very strong distinction between sorcery and divination. Sorcery was criticized both morally and epistemically, but divination was taken seriously, and it was carefully cultivated, and there was...
Okay, and why was that? Sorcery has to do with malevolent or black magic, if you will, the manipulation of people, the manipulation of will. Divination, not so much. Divination is about performing various ritualistic practices for access into what's going to happen in the future. For example, like turtle shells in ancient China were used for divinizational purposes, where they would count the numbers on the turtle shell. They would, again, take the inside. They would write marks. They would do performative rituals to get access into information, to contact higher intelligences. That's why, again, within these pagan cultures, sorcery is dark. It has to do with the manipulation of people. It has to do with the manipulation of will. Divination doesn't necessarily involve other people. It's usually about an access into information. So that's a theological distinction there.
There was a social cultural project of distinguishing the two, trying to really constraining this one, and really reverentially cultivating a proper participation in the other one. So again, existence is proof of probability. This is a possible project for us. And this is, again, what I mean when I say theology is going to be one of the most important sciences in the future. We have to understand how we enter into proper reverential relationships with things we only have an intuitive grasp of, that in very many ways significantly exceed us. Yes, and secularism has kind of wiped out our education of how we relate to beings that might be more grander than us by eradicating a religious sensibility, and that has bereft us. So now I think I've strengthened Jonathan's argument a lot, but I do say let's take note of what the ancient cultures have done. We can learn from them. We have proof that this can be handled well. And secondly, it goes back to my point. If we this is going to, because of the monstrosities that come out, this is going to put increasing pressure on us to confront that threshold of, do we want to make them self-transcendent? Do we want to make them, and David, by rational, I don't mean logical. I mean that capacity.
Right. No, I understand that. Right.
Yeah. Right. And so, I think that what I'm saying is, I think that strengthens the argument that we're going to be pushed by the monstrosity of a lot of this to say, oh, we better get these machines self-corrective and properly oriented towards normativity. And again, that's a doable project.
If I held the keys to OpenAI, like if I was one of those that could peek behind the mask, have you seen that image of the Cthulhu monster with like the happy face on it? Like that's the images of OpenAI, which is like, we have this like little window into what's there, but behind is this massive thing. But like if I had the keys to those large language models, let's say the absolute open door to them, you know, it would be wouldn't it be easy to just manifest the god of war and win? Like wouldn't it?
Okay, but let's take a historical example.
Yeah.
We unleashed a godlike power with atomic warfare, and the monstrosity of that made we just the purely game theoretic machinery built all of these constraints around it.
Yeah.
Right, and then we also are on the verge, possibly, of getting like readily usable, nuclear power, which I think is the only way we could ever actually go green. I think all the renewable stuff is going to be like 10% of our energy needs. And if we're gonna save the environment and not destroy civilization, I think nuclear power is going to be essential. A lot of people are making those arguments, and we have a lot of stuff that we could be doing, liquid fuel forming reactors and stuff. But what I'm saying is there's opportunity here too.
Yeah.
Real opportunity.
No, I really take that point, but it is interesting. I mean, we've put thousands of constraints on the use of nuclear weapons, but we've continued to develop them and improve them and make better and even more destructive ones. I mean, and it'd be interesting to see if we've ever at any point said, you know what, our nuclear weapons are actually strong enough. They're powerful enough and we don't need to advance them anymore. So collectively, I mean, is there an instance of something like that where we say, you know what, we've actually reached the limit because we wouldn't really need it for anything further? I mean, that's a
well. I mean, there was the SALT treaty, and there was a reduction both in the power and the number of nuclear weapons, and then of course, the game theoretic things, they figured a little bit of way around it, and it's always this to and froing.
I want to give an example of something that can run through, and the reason it's very because I realized I was being too abstract before. So like, let's say sacrifice is a human universal. It runs through all civilizations. Human sacrifice runs through all civilizations for the last tens of thousands of years. It seems to be a puzzle that humans are trying to deal with without understanding it completely just through rational means. They're playing it out. They're trying to understand it. Scapegoating seems to be an important aspect of identity formation. And so that is a program that runs through humanity and that most people are completely unaware of and are not conscious of and don't take consciously into their mind when they're making decisions. They act unconsciously with that process that is running through them. And so that is an example to me of a program that runs and that is contained in our language structures, that have been building up for tens of thousands of years that we're not aware of. So if you have this is again the problem. Like if you have a system that's extremely powerful and that is running these types of programs of scapegoating and of identity formation, and the people involved in it are not aware that that's how identity formation works. That is the type of danger that I'm talking about. Like this is a real thing. That as we give these systems a kind of power over us, or they become the things we go to in order to get our decision making, that those things could be running through without people even realizing what's happening, and that decisions would be made based on these structures without, like I said, without even knowing. Those are the things that's just one example, but that's a very simple example that we can we could track and we could see that the ancient, because when we talk about ancient divination, we have to remember that it's like the ancient gods asked for blood, my friends. Like those programs, they asked for blood, and they knew that you had to kill a bunch of people on that pyramid in order to continue your civilization. That is encoded in our culture and is encoded secretly in our language. And so an example, like I do believe that, let's say that the Christian story is a way to deal with that, but the rest is still all there. And we default to it really fast without even, like World War II is a lot of that stuff going on.
We had a super chat that came in from William, throws in $10, says Pageau's listening and relating technique combined with Father Peter's patristic knowledge and Dyer's depth of research might be the Orthodox YouTube Ubermensch. Well, shout out to all of our fellow Orthodox content creators. And this was a conversation we actually had in one of our think tank meetings recently, because we have some very bright individuals in there. And we were talking about the discrepancy between how small the Orthodox community is in America and how prominent and how much quality the online information is. So, and I think that's what William's hitting at here, is that it's ironic that despite us being less than 1% of the American population, when you get on YouTube and you look at Christian apologetics or conversations about culture from a Christian perspective, the Orthodox content creators, I think, produce so much more quality content than any other denomination, if you will, or any other type of group of Christians. And so I think that's certainly aiding in the massive conversion of so many young men. But thank you so much, William, for the $10 super chat. And I got to give a special thank you to Blue Skittle, throws in $5, no comment over on the dono chat. Thank you very much, Blue Skittle, for that. Really appreciate it. And so if you guys want to support the stream as we finish up the last quarter here of this conversation, feel free to send in a question or comment here on YouTube or on the Streamlabs or the Dono chat. Would greatly appreciate that.
Sure.
Rural
And-
one especially, yeah.
Yeah, but the point is that just as there's these implicit monsters that we have sown in unaware, there are also the implicit counteractors, I call it maybe angels, if I'm allowed to speak mythologically, that we've also sown in. And I mean, there's the actual revolution. You see the Buddha, you see Plato really undermining the grammar of sacrifice. And of course, Jesus of Nazareth does that in a profound way. And we have to remember that that's there too. And what that requires is putting into the data set and altering the pathways in the internet so that this information goes into these machines as well. And again, is that happening right now? No. Could it happen? Yes. And it might happen if these machines start sacrificing themselves. And we might have to say, why are they doing that? And this again, at some point we have to decide, are we going to let them be really massively self-destructive? And the economic powers are not going to, imagine if every time you tried to make an atomic bomb, it kept dissolving, right? Like you stop pumping money in.
What if the point was to have total control, and whether it dissolved or destroyed civilization as already known was actually part of the plan?
They won't sacrifice themselves. They'll sacrifice us.
Well, but why? We sacrifice ourselves.
Yeah, well, let's say
No, Christ sacrificed himself, as Pageau's example of the human sacrifice on the Aztec pyramids. Those were people that they conquered in war. Those were not themselves. That was not the in-group. That was not the Aztec. It was various tribes, other groups, other peoples. That's who they sacrificed. So again, I'm not seeing the correlation there with Vervaeke.
The scapegoat mechanism is usually to find another.
Yeah. But when we invoked World War II, we weren't killing goats and chickens. We were killing each other and our own populations.
We were killing. That was again the fight over Nazism and political power. So again, there's still groups of othering there. It's not like Americans were killing Americans. That's a civil war. It was the Germans and the Russians and the British and the French, and then America eventually coming in against the common enemy. Not exactly the same thing as self-sacrifice.
In a huge sacrificial act. And that's what I was picking up on, right? When it becomes titanic and monstrous, that's where it moves to. What I'm saying is, like, this is a Jungian term, like the idea that, yes, there's all this pre-egoic stuff sewn in, but there's also a lot of trans-egoic stuff sewn in, and we just have to properly get it in there so that we got the collective self-correction going on, like we did. I mean, civilizations get some self-correcting processes in here because they don't devolve. Now, they periodically massively collapse. And that's, by the way, that's something an argument I made in my paper. These things can't accelerate to an infinity of intelligence. There is built-in diminishing returns. There's built-in general system collapse to these things. So again, we have to be careful about, we don't know what the limit is, and our intuitive imagination is not good. We know that there are hard and fast a priori arguments that this will threshold at some point. And that also gives me comfort.
At least, like, encoded in our mythology, there seems to be some stories of the relationship between transpersonal agency and technology as being the cause of the end of a civilization, right? That the whole Enochian tradition seems to be encoding something like that through mythological language, which is that humans were able to connect somehow with these transpersonal intelligences, and that those were encoded in technical means, and that this brought about the end of an age. It's there. That part of it is there in our story too. Like there is that story.
But there's also across cultures. There's the Noah story.
Yeah.
There's the person that has the right relationship to ultimacy.
That's right.
And there's a technological response. The arc.
That's right. I agree. Right? I agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, even like in the Revelation image that I've given several times, you have these two images. One is the beast that creates an image of itself and makes it speak, and then seduces everybody by the speaking image. And then there's this other image of a right relationship of technicity and civilization to the transcendent. These two kind of are put up against each other as two possible outcomes.
I mean, the question that arises for me in this context connects this question with I think what strikes me as kind of an interesting philosophical question. But John, you made the distinction between divination and sorcery, and as I understand it, and you can correct me on this, but at the foundation of that distinction is the difference between, sorcery would be in a way using the transpersonal powers, these sort of higher powers, whereas divination would be in a way receiving, the disposition of receptivity. So in one case, you've got human ends that you try to then enlist the help of superhuman forces and the irony is it's precisely when you're trying to use something that you become used yourself, and that's where you get this dialectic. Whereas divination, it's entering into a relationship where one disposes oneself to hear and receive, and therefore, in a certain sense, conform to something greater than oneself. And there you see it's a very different kind of thing. And ironically, in a way, you enter into it more receptively, but that's precisely why you don't become then a tool of it, interestingly. Now for me, the question is how that relates to this issue is, it may be the case that you've got encoded in the language both sacrifice in the sense of violence, René Girard, the scapegoat thing on the one hand, and on the other hand, self-sacrifice in the sense of generous love and so forth. Those might both be encoded in the language. But here's the question to me: is it possible the kind of receptivity that divination implies, the capacity to actually see an other as other and recognize and be open in this kind of radical way, is that something that a machine can ever learn to do? Is it possible actually to behold an other simply, or is there, it seems to me that there's something profoundly different between seeing truth, genuinely seeing truth on the one hand, and being self-corrective on the other. And the kind of genuinely seeing what's true, I don't know if that in itself can be encoded in language. We can tell stories about people that did that, but can the actual insight into truth be encoded simply in passive? Do you see what I'm question I'm raising? Okay.
So I think that if we again open up beyond the propositional and we're talking about being true to and your aim being true, and that the machine has perspectival abilities, noetic abilities, not just dianetic abilities, and we can't use that.
The machine does not have noetic abilities.
That term because of L. Ron Hubbard, but you know what I meant, right? And again, this is this is part of the argument that at the core of my work. It's like, so in a moment of insight, you're not just self-correcting, you are attracted and drawn into, you love the new reality that is disclosed because there's a perspectival and participatory thing. That's what I meant when I said there isn't real self-transcendence unless there's a self that is transcending, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, now, and then the question is, but we're back to our fundamental ontological questions. It is, and I've already said there's no way a Newtonian mechanical computation is going to get there, and so I won't be bound to that because I'm not bound to that. I have a professional career of criticizing that. right. So, is there a dynamical systems updated heliomorphic auto-poietic possibility? I think there is. I think the answer is a very real yes for that. And I don't think we're going to find the answer to that just encoded in the syntactic and semantic relationships between our terms. I think we have to look in, our inaction, how we're enacting, embedded, extended, right, and embodied in a profound way to get those answers. And so my answer is, in that way, a qualified yes. I do think it is possible. And so go ahead, say what you said, please.
Be really precise, just so I understand. So we've been talking about this sort of predictive, calculating probabilities, drawing on everything that's ever been said and being able to derive in some sense from that. So, do you think that we can get to a moment where we actually transcend that cross that threshold beyond that?
Not with the LLMs as they are. That's my argument. Not with the LLMs as they are. They can't get there.
Yeah.
But John's radical proposition is to embody.
Embody and enculture them, and that is the only way we will actually get properly rational beings and beings that care about it and care about
right. That's the irony in the question. Can we give them more and more models to teach them at some point to not have to use models? And I mean, do you see? It's actually really. I don't know that it's possible without but kids have a soul. It's possible to do that if you have. But I don't mean this as like woo-woo stuff. I mean that a natural thing has a principle of unity that transcends the differentiation of the parts and allows those parts to be intrinsically related to each other, and that principle of unity that transcends the differentiation of the parts that allows them to be an organism actually allows them at the same time to have a kind of unity with something other than themselves that transcends the parts of their differentiation. So there's a kind of an intimacy there.
I agree with that ontology, and what I'm arguing is dynamical systems theory is now giving explanations of that are derived from Aristotelian ontology, but make use of like a lot of cutting edge science that we've like we now can start to explain how there is a unity that is not reducible just to some summation of its parts, and how that unity has a top-down influence on the entity that is not reducible to its causes. And I think this is becoming a non-controversial thing to say. And I find, and now we might just add a clash of intuitions, and I'm willing to stop there. I can't see there being, like, that seems to me to be capturing what we're talking about, and you have an intuition that there's something more, but I don't see a something more, and maybe that's where we're sitting.
Well, I think it's the
Yeah, he believes that you can eventually encode a soul, or the concept of a soul, into a machine, and he's rejecting again the hylomorphic framework of, that's where he keeps evoking Aristotle. But just because people think that it's theoretically possible doesn't mean that it is, obviously, but it doesn't make any sense anyways. Schindler highlights, we can teach children to use models to understand models, but eventually they become sentient and fully understand, and they're rational entities because they have a soul. And he's like, whoa, they're because at the beginning of the conversation, if you remember, Vervaeke wanted to not utilize the soul as a unique thing that would separate and divorce us from the machines, because he doesn't recognize that as a fundamental distinction that can't be overcome in regards to the development of a sentient AI. But if the soul is actually something that comes from God and is transcendent, it doesn't matter how many theorems or how many speculations that have come about in regards to sentient AI. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so I think that's why Vervaeke, he's highlighting that, there's a confrontation between intuitions here in regards to rationality and the soul, but his doesn't make any sense, because it sort of divorces soul and rationality as something that can be programmed. It doesn't make any sense.
Intuition David has, and tell me if I'm wrong, David, and because that connects with the way I think, is that that unity is given. It cannot be made. And I know that sounds weird, but it's somehow, it's like, if I'm making, even in terms of technology, right? It's like, if I'm making a car, that unity is given. I'm gathering things towards that purpose, right? And so the purpose, the unity part of something is always, it comes from heaven, in the sense that you can't make it. It's given from it's already taken for granted even before you start to unify multiplicity together. And that in the making of these beings, we have that problem. It's like we're doing it bottom up. Like, can we gather enough stuff so that this stuff reaches a unity?
Right. See, and if I just could it seems to me that if this is ever going to be possible, it would have to take. So, and when I raise the question, it's actually a question. So I don't mean to be like challenging that it can't possibly happen. I'm just thinking about what would be the conditions.
Please remember that I said we might realize that we can't, and that would be important. I am not.
Yeah, but so it seems to me if it were to be,
I think Vervaeke is getting a little flustered now.
Possible, it would have to be something like a kind of electronic analog to cloning. That you take.
So what if I told you that we now have like we have systems that are electrochemical, biological versions of memory that are now in production, and we don't make them. They self-organize and emerge, and they emerge bottom up from the causal interaction, but they are also top-down constrained by principles of self-organization. Like, that already exists.
That's what I'm asking about, because it seems to me, but there is going to be, you're deriving that from models, you're deriving from real intelligent beings now, which is a slightly different thing. And I mean that would be interesting. Is that, because to me the bottom up top down is not quite adequate, and the top down constraints is not quite, because it would have to be not just a constraint, but because that presupposes that there was something there that then that the constraint is coming from outside. And what I'm talking about is a kind of a unity that precedes, that's presupposed. And I'm wondering how you can get that into something if it's the very nature of it to be presupposed. And I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying if you can, it seems to me that you're going to have to somehow derive it from a living thing. And that's conceivable. That's conceivable, I suppose. But we are talking about something really frightening.
We are, and that's why I keep saying it's a threshold. I mean, if you take the sort of biological analogy seriously, the way Veri does, of course it precedes the organism. It's there in the environment. It's there in the society. It's there in the. I mean, I can roll in 100 Hegelian arguments here about how it does, right? About how, and you know, and those don't have to be supernaturalistic. You have Brandom and Pinker and others saying, no, this can be given a completely naturalistic explanation. And I'm not here to challenge things, but what I'm saying is. I don't have any problem acknowledging everything you just said, right? And I don't think I'm misunderstanding you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm actually, I mean this sort of just an exploratory sort of way, but I wonder if there's a difference between the unity of an organism, and this is where Hegel might not be so helpful. The difference between the givenness of the unity of an organism and the givenness of the unity of a society or a culture. But those aren't exactly the same thing, because there's something and there's a kind of relative priority of either one, but there's something really distinctive about the unity of an organism that's very that I think is crucial to this question, to my mind, in a way. And I'm not saying it can't be answered, but that's the question that would have to be answered. How do we actually reproduce that kind of unity?
Well, we know stuff that Aristotle didn't know. You are not an Aristotelian unity. You are a society. You literally are billions of animals, right? And so that's important. And that means there might not be a difference in kind between how you are organized as a living thing and how societies are organized. And people like Michael Levin are producing some really important empirical evidence indicating that's kind of the case. And I'm not saying I'm not saying anything's conclusive, but it needs to be taken seriously.
I think that I agree with you, John. I think that's the way that I try to always speak about agency intelligence is one that tries to scale almost effortlessly through the different, to avoid the woo soul that we're afraid of. But then again, this is the issue. Like, this is in some ways it's the same problem. Like, one way or the other. So let's say you have a group that self-organizes around a purpose, right? Or self-organizes around affiliation or some type of origin, right? That affiliation, that purpose is also given, right? It's like it appears as a revelation, and then all of a sudden we're all hunting a lion together, and now we're a group and we're moving towards a purpose. Now, this is the problem with the situation of what's going now, is that what is it? What angel are we catching? Like, what God are we trying to manifest? Like, which unity, what purpose? We have no idea. And so we're building this massive body, like this huge, the most powerful body that's ever existed, but nobody knows what it is we're trying to catch. Because if I get together with a bunch of guys to play basketball, I know what that body is. I know what that agentic body, intelligent body is moving towards.
Right.
If I get together with my family and I celebrate our unity, it's because I know that we all come from the same parent and that there's affiliation that makes our society coherent towards something. But now we have this problem, which is what are we doing? Like, we're just building this giant body. It's like
I agree, and I've agreed with that.
And this gets back to my point earlier at the beginning of the stream when I talked about how technology is being built in the image of fallen man. And so the fact that we're building all these things and we have no idea where we're going, and the hope is that we're going to create a material, robotic, digital AI God. I mean, this is, again, to Jonathan's point, we don't even know what the end point is. We don't even know where this thing is going. We're just again funneling all this amount of money, all these major corporations, the entire big tech monopoly is so invested in this. Yet where's it going? And look at the values of the people who are programming it. It's literally the worship of Mammon. The angel that they're going to catch, to use Pageau's phrasing, is Lucifer himself, the fallen angel. That's where this is going. And that's the body that we're building. As I said earlier, I speculate that all this stuff is literally building what I've said before, the cybernetic skeleton of Satan. And it doesn't mean that technology is evil in of itself. It's that what we're doing with it, we don't even know what our purpose is. And it's like people are driven intrinsically for some reason to create and continue to build this thing. And I think what they're doing is it's ultimately leading Mammon, and the worship of money and power is ultimately leading to the erection and the creation of the body of the evil one, which he does not have.
And the thing that's so odd, I mean, typically if you think of technology as a human creation in some good positive sense, it has limits, and it has a particular place, and it has a particular meaning, it has a particular purpose, precisely because we created in order to solve some kind of a problem. There's some need that needs to be filled, and that need has a kind of natural givenness, or it's revealed somehow that it's a responsive to something that we see. What's so interesting, Neil Postman made this point about when he said he went to a car dealership and wanted to buy a car, and the man was explaining to him that they had now these automatic windows that would roll down at the push of a button. And he said his I mean, this sounds so naive, but it's a profoundly interesting question. He said, well, what problem does that solve? And of course, the problem that it solves is the problem of rolling a window down. And his response was, I never perceived that to be a problem. I mean, and it's really interesting. AI, I mean, the thing is, what problem are we creating it to solve? I mean, in a certain sense, it's a very different mindset. We're just kind of we just want to see what we can do and see what can be done. And in a way, the problems are something that we are arriving at and are surprising us, rather than something that we're actually creating something that just simple task of solving for us. You see, I mean, I think that's connected to this placing ourselves in the hands of an angel of some sort, or entering into a kind of an agency that's bigger than we are. I know those are all connected.
They are, but I mean, one problem that was trying to be solved was the scientific problem of, like, strong AI was a project of explaining intelligence, and that's a worthy thing to do. And the fact.
But as I said earlier, he said AI is there to explain intelligence. I just laid out at the opening monologue of this stream how many different theories, academic theories, for the explanation of consciousness, and I highlighted the three fundamental problems of the entire field in the philosophy of mind. Is it can't fully describe the descriptive problem of consciousness, it can't fully explain the explanatory problem of consciousness, and it can't fully articulate the functional problem of consciousness. Where functional, why does it exist? Explanatory, how does it exist? And number one, descriptive of what is it in the first place. And so how can AI solve the problem of intelligence when the entire field and the philosophy of mind hasn't even come down on a conclusion of what consciousness or intelligence is?
The fact that this technology has largely been separated.
But notice that's interesting. That's not a technical problem. Like you explaining something. It's actually, I mean, to use the classical distinction between theory and praxis, that's a sort of a theoretical issue rather than a practical one. But we think of this as a technology. I mean, that's a curious thing.
Well, yeah, and I would get into things like books are technologies that move between the theoretical and practical. Very powerful. And it's one of the greatest technologies we ever invented, and it had all kinds of unforeseen consequences, and it really massively disrupted society. But I wanted to make another point, and this isn't a challenge. This is just a clarification point, right? These like think about a computer. What problem does a computer solve? It doesn't solve a problem. It is meant to be a multiple problem solver. And then what we're trying to do is make a general problem solver. So what problem is it trying to solve? It's not trying to solve any problem. It's trying to enhance our abilities to solve all the problems we try to solve. So this machine's going to help us in medicine. It already is. It's going to help us, right, in physics and all. Like that. And so that's the answer. Now, again, that's not a challenge. I'm just speaking on behalf of people that think about this.
But it is kind of interesting. I mean, so the problem that it's solving is the need to be able to solve any possible problem.
Solving a meta problem,
But I mean, it is kind of it's sort of curious that precisely because of the indeterminacy of that, we're exposing this, and I'm just sort of stating, our condition here in a way. We're sort of exposing ourselves to a really great risk. I'm just restating what everybody has been saying here today, but that's something that requires some wisdom, as you've been saying over and over, John, and prayer, to use Jonathan's language too.
I just want to do one.
Ken, you're jumping in.
Mentioned in my essay, which is we have done this before. That's how civilization emerged. Nobody built it to solve a problem. There was a bunch of little problems, and what civilization is a meta problem solver, right? And that's what it is. And then you can. So I've actually suggested we should also be paying attention to the lifetimes and the life cycles of civilizations, and how civilizations reproduce, and why they rise and why they fall, to get some better understanding, some other ways of thinking about these machines.
So
civilizations are huge distributed cognition, collective intelligence machines. That's the living in cities is a horrible idea, except for the fact that it gives us better access to the collective intelligence of distributed cognition. That's the benefit that outweighs all the many noxious side effects of living in cities.
You can also get better coffee typically.
Yeah. So we're coming toward the end of our time here. I mean, this has been fantastic.
This is amazing. Like, I rarely can go for 2 hours on any conversation. Like we've just been going.
Well, not only go for 2 hours, but sort of wish we had another 2.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, we can work on doing this.
All right, so guys, that's going to conclude the conversation here. As we highlighted at multiple points, can AI be sentient, and what is consciousness? I didn't see that answered. I know that Vervaeke, and he's very knowledgeable about this field, and he's very knowledgeable about the state of the technology. But his framing that somehow we can program virtue, we can program wisdom, we can orient AI towards God. Which God? What's wisdom? Where does wisdom come from? What's consciousness? How do we know something's sentient? These more fundamental questions, philosophers are paid their entire life to try to answer some of these, and we haven't made any progress since the 80s. Yeah, we know a lot more about the brain. We've mapped the brain. We know tons about the brain, as we've talked about with the brain implants and the Neuralink and all that different technology, but that's not the same thing as consciousness. That's not the same thing as a mind. And does a mind really exist? I mean, so the point of today's stream, again, was trying to talk about sentience. We laid out a bunch of different stuff, and then continue to track Vervaeke and his, what does he call them? What does he call them? AI sages, silicon sages. So we've continue to track his conversation on this. I'm still not convinced at all of his worldview, but it is what it is. So, guys, thank you so much. Marcus Antonio, I saw that you upgraded your membership, brother. If you can email me your email so I can give you access to some of the videos on the paywall at the website. Thank you so much. Marcus Antonio said, good stream. Thank you very much, brother, for all your support. If you can email me your email again at David or at Church of the Eternal Logos at gmail.com, Church of the Eternal Logos at gmail.com. Marcus, email me, and then I can add your email behind the paywall so you'll be able to have access to some of those videos. And then I want to give a special thank you to Travis, throws in $5 and says, great stream as always. Well, thank you very much, Travis. He says, really enjoyed your recent stream with Father Moses McPherson on athleticism and orthodoxy. Answered a lot of questions I've had for a while. Well, thank you so much, Travis, for the support, my brother. And I'm really glad that you enjoyed that stream. Father Moses is a great guy, and really enjoyed even my private conversations with him. So thank you very much, Travis, for the support. Let me just double check everything to see if anybody sent in any more questions, comments, or support here. Okay. So the dono chat does not look like anybody sent anything in. And then looking at Streamlabs, looks like nothing there as well. So anyways, Travis, thank you so much, brother. And again, I want to give a special thank you to Logan Daly for support, Marcus Antonio for upping his membership. Shout out to Orthodox Boomer Grandma. Shout out to AC, Melaforta, William, Travis, Blue Skittle. Thank you so much, Blue Skittle, for your support on the dono chat. And shout out to JC, who threw in a $10 super chat earlier. It came up on screen. BMX 1966 and Hammer for all your guys' support today. I really do appreciate that. Smash that like for everybody who's still here. Really appreciate it. And I will be back later this week with some sponsored streams. We got an open panel lined up. So we should be, I think we got three to four streams planned this week, including this one. So, guys, thank you all so much. I hope this stream was useful. And I will see you guys in the next one, which I believe will be Wednesday. So as always, until then, God bless. Oh, Logan Daly throws in a quick super chat right before I click the end stream. And he said, take some more love. And remember, Nubwave never dies. Well, thank you so much, Logan Daly. I literally almost clicked in stream there. So thank you very much for that $10 super chat, Logan Daly. And we'll be doing Logan Daly's sponsored stream this week, along with AC's Nishitani discussion on Zen Buddhism, which I apologize to AC that's taken so long. It is a dense philosophical text, but we'll be doing that. So thank you very much, Logan Daly. And Marcus Antonio, for your guys' support with gifting the memberships. I know everybody in the chat really appreciates it. And thank you, AC, for all your support. So I will be back Wednesday. I will see you all then. As always, until then, God bless.